this. I'm pretty sure that we have a speaker back there, as a matter of fact. So with that, maybe wait about 30 seconds. What's another 30 seconds, right? Said that they could hear us. They can hear the sound of my or of your voice. Okay, we'll go ahead and kick this off. A little late, but that's okay too. Just excited to be together. So I don't know who's going to lead this discussion, Mr. Segedy, but we'll begin the 2019 capital budget review.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to present. The capital budget really is one of the most important tools that we have to grow and develop the city. As you know, we continue to work toward Mayor Horrigan's goal to grow the city's population to 250,000 by the year 2050. We're hard at work on improving the business climate in the city through projects like Great Streets Akron and Elevate Akron. It's with these efforts in mind that we put this capital budget together. All the projects that are included in the budget, whether that's transportation, utilities, parks and recreation, public safety, or economic development, work together to improve the quality of life in Akron, which helps attract people and jobs to the city. I think you'll see today, as with all budgets, it's critical that we set realistic priorities, that we wisely steward the revenues that have been entrusted to us. Good fiscal stewardship is very important to this administration. We've worked hard to limit the general obligation debt included in the budget to an absolute minimum. Before we start, I can't stop but say something about Issue 4, the great success that Issue 4 has brought. It's really been a game changer for mission critical public services, streets, police, and fire. I think every day Akronites can see firsthand the benefits that Issue 4 has produced. Over 54.5 miles of streets were repaved last year on time and on budget. We've got 2 fire stations under construction currently, and a lot of critical equipment upgrades for both police and fire. We estimate there'll be about $15.5 million in revenues from Issue 4 in 2019, so that's great news. Just a few words on process, and then I'll turn it over to our capital budget staff to go through the budget. Last year we did solicit budget requests from all city departments as well as from city council members. We met with city departments to review these requests, to discuss feasibility, budgetary implications, funding options, and project timelines. As I mentioned before, as with all budgets, there are more needs than there are revenues, so we work closely with all city departments to prioritize these projects. All of that, when the smoke cleared, is culminated in the $341 million budget that you have before you. I did want to remind Council you will see these projects again as project-specific legislation comes forward. What we're going to do today is to go through transportation, parks and rec, public facilities, and economic development, and then we'll address public utilities at the meeting on January 28th. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our capital budget staff to go through a PowerPoint presentation, and I think you'll see a lot of the great projects that have been put together. Thank you.
Very good. Is this, I know it changes a bit from time to time, is this going to be consistent with the capital budget? The slides?
Yes,
I mean, totally.
It's identical.
I know we do tweaks sometimes along the way, so it's identical.
Right now it's identical. There have been some tweaks. The PowerPoint presentation is also on your iPads.
Okay, very
so
good.
I don't know how you access that, but it is on your iPad.
Somewhere.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, good. So what we'll do is go ahead and go over everything, and then I'll kind of like scope the room out, and we can ask questions along the way.
Terrific. Thank
Tomek?
you. So Jim Ashley and I are going to tag team on the bulk of the presentation dealing with transportation, parks, recreation, public facilities, miscellaneous housing portion, and the housing portion. And then we'll ask the folks from economic development to delve into more deeper into those line items. As Mr. Segedy indicated, we have met extensively with different departments, looking at and discussing their needs, and then we took all of that information, compiled this budget for your review today. I'll go ahead and start the presentation. As Councilman Fusco indicated, as you have questions, please feel free to ask those as we move along. So the budget, 2019 recommended budget is about $341 million, which is up a little bit from the $332 million from 2018. It's probably about an 8% $8 million increase. The bulk of the revenue for that is coming from state funds and also looking at local funds. Looking at that a little bit deeper, this slide shows a comparison between what our 2018 budget was compared to what the proposed 2019 budget is. We will see a little bit of a decrease from our in the local funds. Some of the court costs were moved to later years, so that contributed to that decrease. We also see an increase in the state funding, about $11 million increase, and that is attributed to our Romick Road project.
Which is, I'm sorry, say that again?
It's the state funds are slightly higher, and that's attributed to the Romick Road project.
Romick Road,
Yes.
thank you.
Looking at our proposed local revenue sources, we're looking at about $97 million. I believe earlier this afternoon, Councilman Kilby had asked about the GO share, general obligation. That's about $14 million, which is about 14% of our local revenue share. And that is also a little bit lower than what we had in 2018. In terms of regional revenue sources, this is pretty consistent, a little bit lower than 2018, but these are local shares working with City of Barberton, Department of Environmental Services through the county, and some resources from Summit County as well. I'm not going to go into too much with the revenue. I want to.
What's the DOES? What's that?
I think it was the Department of Environmental Services. So they deal with, I believe, with the trash pickup, sewer lines for the county.
Sewer?
Pardon me?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ms. Mo.
Pardon me?
So, put my speaker, I'm sorry. Could you talk about the JED funds, the difference between these two? Because you're talking about $4.8 million.
Explain.
The difference between,
The JED and the JED special
JED district
assessments.
funds and the special assessments, which is probably, the special assessments, I'm guessing, is for, like, if a project has to go in and they want to put in lines?
if they're assessed, if the
Like-
properties are assessed, or work that
Special
was done in
assessments.
front of their properties, JED is our income tax share.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
State revenues, the bulk of that is coming from the Water Pollution Control Fund. Also, there are some resources coming in from Ohio Public Works Commission, but a total of the state revenues is about $190 million. And finally, federal revenue, it could vary from the EPA to Department of Transportation to Department of Housing and Urban Development, but we anticipate revenues of approximately $43 million in federal funds in 2019. Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Neal?
Thank you. Just going back to the JED dollars, when we assess that, is it at cost, or are we allowed to make any kind of profits?
No.
So we would have to go, I'm not familiar with the JED agreements. We'd have to go back and look at those agreements, and we can get back to you in regards to
Yeah,
that.
because, I mean, those assessments, and when we look at all the infrastructure costs that we have going on inside the city, if we could, it may not be directly, but indirectly, if some kind of way we can have some type of way of assessing those external projects for some of that as well? Just to,
Mr. Fricker?
Yeah, I can address that. So the assessments, we have rates that are established, that are available on our Engineering Bureau website for the different types of activities we do, whether it's paving or curbs or sidewalks, and all of those, there's an assessment rate. We do not recover 100% of the cost because those rates haven't been adjusted in a while, but we are not making a profit on those construction activities.
Mr. Fricker, is that on us, or is that the service director to, whose responsibility is?
No, those are approved by council.
So then we need to maybe put it on our agenda to make sure that we bring in legislation to look at bringing those rates up to date then?
Yeah, that's something that has not been addressed in, I believe, 2009, at least for the main, the paving-related assessment rates have not been changed since 2009.
Okay.
Thank you. Noted. Very good, Ms. Tomic.
So the final revenue screen looks at private resources that are coming into the community. I thought even closer than this?
Yeah,
Okay.
because it doesn't
Sorry.
pick up for everyone else.
Okay.
Doesn't pick up, so.
So
you
the
got-
final revenue slide looks at private revenue sources, and that can vary from our partnership with the Akron Community Foundation, and again, with special assessments that we charge our residents for various assessed projects. So our TED, we talked about the revenue side of it. Our expenditure side is, again, a total of $341 million. Of that, 54%, or $186 million, is attributed to our water and sewer projects. The remainder of the budget is 46% is then split between transportation, public facility improvements, parks and recreation, and miscellaneous. So what we did then is we took out the water and sewer portion of the budget and are looking at that, and that's what we'll be covering today. So of that, $154 million is going towards economic development projects, transportation projects. So for example, transportation is about $60 million, almost $61 million, or 41% of that. The other one of significance is economic development, which is about $18 million, or 12% of that portion of the budget. And the final one is looking at our debt service, which is about $46 million, or 30% of that $154 million is going to cover that. The next slide examines our 18 and 19 expenditures. And again, you'll see that we have a slight increase in our transportation costs, a slight increase in our economic development projects, and also looking at our debt service as well. When we released the capital budget to you on December 17th, we also provided you with a breakout, to you and citizens of Akron, a breakout of our proposed 2019 income tax for expenditures. Looking at a total of about $15.5 million, about $5.1 million is going to Public Service Department, including the resurfacing program and equipment replacement. Police is looking at about $5.2 million, and the Akron Fire Department is looking at about $5 million of 2019 proposed income tax dollars.
When you look, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Mobian?
Oh, I'm sorry. When you look at the top section, the road paving section, we talk about 55 miles of paved road. How much additional paving did we do with the issue 4 money over what we had projected in the 27%?
So it'll be pretty much even to what we indicated in 2018, about 54 miles.
Total, but I mean over, if we didn't have issue 4, what would it have been?
Comparing to what we did before issue 4 was passed.
I think it was about,
So 34 more miles.
Okay,
so.
thank you.
Okay. Anyone else, Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be a question from Mr. Fricker. When we talked about, the shortfall we had last year, it was stated that we used some issue $4 to cover that.
I don't know what the shortfall you're referring to.
The the shortfall, some debate if it was 9 million, when we looked at the shortfall that we had, did we use?
No, so we budgeted some issue $4 for 2018 for police and fire, maintaining staffing levels for police and fire. But the $9 million that you keep referring to, that was always budgeted with the cell tower revenue that we brought in.
I understand it was always budgeted, but the reality of it is that we had to expense. That's why we had to sell an asset to cover it. The question I'm asking now is, was that a one-time occurrence so we don't have to dip into issue $4 to cover that portion anymore? Because issue 4
That is correct.
Okay.
So we ended 2018 with a balanced budget without doing a cell tower one-time transaction.
Okay, so everything for this year, 2019, is all capital expenditure?
No, there was a portion of this, and it will be reflected. There was a portion of the, I believe it's reflected on this page, that we're using about $4 million of the issue 4 funds for staffing in police and fire.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Ms. Tomic?
So looking at our first set of transportation projects, we have the Aqueduct Green Streets Improvements projects. These resources are actually to complete the project. The project was completed in fall of 2018. That included full depth reconstruction, green infrastructure, and complete street elements. So what you're seeing in the 2019 budget is just to cover the closing costs to wrap things up for that 2018 project.
Very good.
Canton Road, East Market Street intersection, we're looking at initial design and acquisition costs for the replacement of signals at the intersection of Canton Road and East Market. We are in the final design to be completed in 2019 with some initial acquisition in 2019, and we're looking for that project to start in 2020. East Exchange, complete streets. This is looking at design and preliminary plans for improvements along East Exchange Street up by the university. That would include looking at interconnected signals, bike lanes, and pedestrian improvements. This is initial design. We're looking at construction for sometime in 2022, so we're still a couple years away from that one.
Very good.
The High Street Main Broadway two-way traffic study, we've been asked to look at what it would look like if High Street and Broadway were actually, rather than one direction, looking at two-way in both of those directions. What would be the impact of both of those in terms of turn lanes, lighting, and all of that. So this is an initial study to examine that in 2019.
But it can only,
Ms. Samobian?
I'm sorry, I just assumed this was a conversation.
Raise your hand.
It can only go so far, though. When you get down close to Second Baptist Church and Barges, they've already put in all this one-way, expensive thoroughfare. Okay.
Yep. So, and then also looking at
At the north end by the Y Bridge,
by the Y
right?
I was gonna say the
too.
Y Bridge.
So those are concerns. So that's what we'll be looking at.
Sure.
Okay. So we're all familiar with the next one, Main Street Promenade. We are about 20-25% complete with the construction. We're looking for a completion of construction of Phase 1 in spring of 2020. What this is, what you see before your budget is to fund the remainder of that project to see us through 2020. The next phase of that then is Main Street. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Ms. Sims.
So is the $11 million, is that what we're encumbering in that till 2020?
So you actually have two. Phase 1 is what we were awarded with what we refer to as the first federal funds of Tiger Grant 1. So that Phase 1 goes from, where are the limits for Phase 1?
I think it's Cedar to Mill.
Cedar to Mill. So that's Phase 1. The bulk of that was funded in 2018. Phase 2 is our second award of Tiger funds, which is from the federal government, and that is currently under design, and that is the $11 million that you see. And those limits are from Mill Street to Route 59. And that should be coming before council probably within the next month for Phase 2.
Ms. Samples?
So within this Main Street Promenade, built into those funds, is this just for the reconstruction? What are we doing to help offset those businesses down there that are affected? Is it built into their funding wise?
Mr. Hardy?
To answer that question, those efforts are not built into these numbers. However, we do have several programs that we've deployed in partnership with DAP, working with businesses. Julie Pryzeski from Integrated Development has been assigned to Main Street, so if you know of anybody and you hear anything, get to Julie. And then Kimberly at DAP, Kimberly Beckett is her counterpart at DAP, and so they form a team daily. They go out and meet, so we're keeping tabs on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sims?
Sure, did we answer the $100 million, is that, this project, $11 million starts at 2020?
So Phase 1 is under construction right now from Cedar to Mill, and that will complete it in spring of 2020. Phase 2 was recently awarded to us by the Department of Transportation. And so right now, that is under design. We are going to be issuing a request for proposals for design build for Phase 2, which is from Milda, State Route 59, and that will be coming to council within the next month.
The actual plan.
The actual, yes, the request for. I'm not sure what Phase 2 is when it's going to start.
Mr. Hewitt?
We anticipate with the design build process and the RFP that'll go out this spring that we'll be under construction this fall on Phase 2. Yes.
Very good, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Tillman.
Okay, so Mall Avenue improvements, Phase 1, we are looking at, and this was, we looked at this as well last year. We're looking at reconstruction of the brick pavement from South Hawkins to Snyder Park. So the money that's in the budget right now is just for initial design phases, and we're also looking at applying to OPWC, Ohio Public Works Commission, to help us with that funding.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Tomic, I'm sure Mr. Segedy knows. I'm going to get questions from folks asking, what's our plan for the next phase, or how far away is that? Do we have an idea? The next half of
I'll defer to the engineering department to answer that in detail, but I know it is part of a bigger scope of more reconstruction of Mall Avenue, including eventually from Hawkins over to White Pond.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking of the Mall Avenue from where you're ending up at Snyder Park going towards
Over to Exchange.
Yeah, you know how the bricks are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mr. Hewitt?
Presently, that's not in this coming year's budget, but that's in the 5-year plan that we've been working with the planning department on prioritizing the projects that'll be organized for the next 5 years, and that'll be something we're working directly with the capital planning on how to properly budget in that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
We're trying to take it in smaller pieces because funding-wise, it just,
would be
looking at capacities.
expensive.
Yeah. So.
Be super expensive.
North Main Street improvements. So these are very preliminary designs for looking at what North Main Street could look like from the Y Bridge to the North Corporation line of Cuyahoga Falls. That could include road diets, bike lanes, signalizations, paving, sidewalks, parking. So those are all things that the engineering is looking at in conjunction with the planning department, and that will come back to council perhaps in a year or 2 years from that, but these are just initial design phases for that.
Thank you.
Talmadge Avenue improvements. So we have completed our design. We're looking for final approval from the Ohio Department of Transportation. That will include full improvements, including realignment of Dayton Street, lane reductions, upgrading traffic signals, and sidewalks. We're hoping this too should come back to council within the next month, within the next 6 weeks. Advertising for construction to begin in the summer of 2019 and beginning late summer of 2019 with a hopeful completion date sometime in 2020. Smith Road traffic study. This was a commitment made to address the concerns of the residents along Smith Road. with the construction of the parking lot of Signet, what impact is that going to have? So we have reserved money in the capital budget to initiate those conversations and look at that, look at a study and see what those impacts could be.
Thank you. Yes, oh, yes. President Somerville?
Thank you so much. I know maybe, I don't know if it was you, Jason, we'd had a conversation to see if there were some of the other surrounding city, if they'd be willing to share some of those costs for that study. Had we
Yeah, I
thought of
think
that?
that's a great question. I think our approach would be that's a high-end number, and we would look to see if we could get some assistance from Fairlawn or the county engineer. And we are, right now, the engineering department's working with the county engineer to reevaluate the speed limits on Smith Road. There's some inconsistent street speed limits, so that's kind of a prelude to studying it more comprehensively.
Even including Beth, right? I mean, they're right there.
They're part of the county, but we can
Yeah.
talk to the county, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Sims.
We could, once, this will come back, so once we have those conversations, yeah, okay? The next line item is a standard line item that we have in there. It's about $100,000 that we have reserved for annual maintenance of our bridges throughout the city of Akron.
Okay.
Evans Avenue, this was a carryover from last year. It was actually approved by council in June of 18. The project has been bid and awarded, and construction to start in spring of 2019. But it is to look at the realignment of Evans Avenue and to provide grade separations of the, over the railroad tracks.
Okay.
The Home Avenue Bridge over Little Cuyahoga, this is a Summit County sponsored project. During construction, the city did ask that we look at some water lines under the bridge to be replaced and install a new sewer sanitary line. So based on our request, this would be our share of that project.
Okay.
North Main Street Bridge over Howard Street ramp, the county is looking at converting that to an at-grade crossing. So this $10,000 would be our share of that project.
Over Howard Street ramp, North Main Street Bridge over
This
Howard
is just south of the high-level bridge where Howard kind of goes under Main Street.
Okay,
There's
okay,
that.
gotcha.
The goal there would be to eliminate that bridge because it's expensive to maintain, and I know the county's working on eventually replacing the high-level bridge, which is a farther out, and as you can imagine, far more expensive project.
Way out, yeah. Cool.
So the next line project is State Route 93 over a railroad. This is a strictly ODOT-funded project, bridge repairs on Manchester Road over the CSX railroad lines. This too has been awarded by approved by council and awarded. It should be under construction, and it's slated for completion in 2019. State Route 8 bridge replacement. This is our share for 2019. This is actually a project that won't start construction until 2021. It is an ODOT project. Our share is very minimal. Total project is $130 million. So the state is requesting us that we contribute $5,000, or how much is
It says 20.
$20,000 for this year.
Can't make it 5 like you
No.
just said?
Stuber Bridge over the Little Cuyahoga. This has been identified as a high priority due to ongoing flooding concerns. So we are proposing to look at some options, alternatives to address that. We are seeking other funding sources through OPWC, but it is $50,000 for design work. And the same is also can be said for the Waterloo Road, Brewster Creek culvert replacement. It's also in design right now, and it is also contingent on funding through OPWC.
Go ahead. Sims?
On the East Avenue Bridge, that was, is there any structural
Mr. Hewitt?
That bridge is actually owned by ODOT, so any of the repairs that are being identified, ODOT will be making those repairs, so they will not be at our cost.
So we kind of looking at the bridges in our city, that's why.
Yeah, we actually do a yearly inspection of every bridge that the city owns. That is a bridge, that specific bridge is one that ODOT owns, so they're responsible for the yearly inspection and maintenance of it. But of all the bridges that we actually own, we go through every year, evaluate every single one of them, and then identify, that's how we come with the projects that are in this bridge program. We identify the projects, the bridges that need work, and then we develop our capital needs from that.
So last question, are we working with ODOT? Do we have any information about, the condition of the bridge subsequently?
ODOT has the 2 lanes closed on the bridge while they're designing their necessary repairs, and then they'll coordinate with us when they make their repairs. But they've been, as far as the road closure, they've been working with our public works and traffic staff on the road closure presently.
Good. Okay, Ms. Tomek?
So the next project is looking at ramp realignments on I-76 from the Central Avenue until 27th Street. This too is an ODOT project and also federally funded. We have no city funds in this project at all. Additionally, looking at ODOT is resurfacing a portion of the US Route 224 near Hillbush and the railroad. This is primarily ODOT funded, but there is our share of about $59 million for that project. Next section deals with residential streets. The first line item on there is Forest Edge. This is for closeout charges. The project was completed in fall of 2018, so just wrapping that up in early 2019. The final one on there is 4th Street improvements. This is in design. It is looking at full improvements from Kenmore Boulevard to Maryland along 4th Street, including new asphalt pavement, concrete curb, and gutter work. This too will be coming to council within the next couple of weeks with more detailed information, but right now it's a line item in our budget.
Where is this? Oh, Mr.
Mobian?
It's over by Kenmore Boulevard to Maryland Avenue.
Oh, is that
Yep.
what? Okay.
So the next section deals with the resurfacing program. Total local sponsored share of resurfacing is $7 million. This includes a combination of income tax $4 in addition to special assessments and some general obligation debt. It is identical to the dollar amount that we allocated in our 2018 budget at $7 million.
Okay.
The next 3 projects are also resurfacing projects looking along East Waterloo Road. Phase 1 is Manchester to Glenmount. Phase 2 is Glenmount to Kelly Avenue. And then also looking at resurfacing on State Route 18 and 261. These are all ODOT funded projects. And they do require, I believe these do require a share contribution from us. Therefore, it's in the 2019 budget, although the resurfacing isn't scheduled until 2020.
So, okay, gotcha. So they're just placeholders.
Correct.
Okay.
We have to pay our share this year in 19, but the
Okay,
construction won't start
okay.
until
In 2020?
2020, yes.
Okay, so, because that seems low,
Yeah.
the 80,000, obviously.
So
Very
as we had mentioned, we had conversations with each department about what the needs are in the community. And one thing that became very clear to us is the need to look at our concrete streets and looking at restoring some of those. So this year, we budgeted about $500,000 of income tax and assessments to look at the restoration of some of our concrete streets. We have had this in the budget in the past. It's probably been missing for a couple years, so we are revisiting that, and based on recommendations from engineering, we're putting about $500,000 of income tax money and special assessments in that.
So, a question for Mr. Hewitt. So what is best? It looks as though the repair piece is part of this, but I question the repair piece because it doesn't seem to hold up. I mean, obviously, you're the expert here in the room.
Concrete streets have a much longer life expectancy when they're installed, but then but when it's time to actually make repairs, they're definitely more expensive to repair. So the cost trade-off is the length of the life of the pavement versus once you have to make a repair. The unfortunate part about it is concrete repairs are pretty expensive, so we've been focusing our efforts on resurfacing of the asphalt streets, to try and get more bang for our buck, and so that it's actually better for the traveling public and for our citizens. So that's why you haven't seen as much concrete streets as you have asphalt streets.
Yeah, it doesn't seem, as I mentioned, in terms of repairing a concrete street, doesn't hold up hardly at all. It seems to me, like I said, I'm sure there's studies that have been conducted, but it just doesn't seem to hold up, these concrete streets. Once they get to that level where they're...
When they've reached a point of failure, you need to take them out and replace them.
Exactly right. And that's super expensive, right? I assume. Mr. Kilby?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The $500,000 is for streets and sidewalk concrete?
The $500,000 is just for streets.
Okay, good. Independence Avenue is in my ward, is in very bad shape, as you probably know. Cuyahoga Falls is going to start the Howe Road project, I think, this spring. And somebody told me that the state is kicking in a lot of money to them, because I know it's expensive. And somebody said that the state's going to repair part of Independence, because that's going to be a detour, because there's going to be one lane going westbound from Chapel Hill on Howe Road, and you can't get to Chapel Hill on Howe Road. You can get into the plaza, but there's going to be a detour to get to Chapel Hill going up Howe Road and up Independence to Chapel Hill. Does anybody know if that's true or not?
I'll defer to Mr. Hewitt.
That is true. Okay.
That is correct.
Mr.
How much are they planning on doing of Independence? Does anybody know?
Mr. Tedecki?
I don't know the exact dollar amount. They have identified in their plans that they're going to bid a small portion of money to make sure the detour route is in acceptable condition. That doesn't mean they're going to go in and replace, large sections of concrete, but they will put some money into it to get a better rideability, much better than it is now.
Can you patch concrete with asphalt for its temporary patch? Is that feasible or not?
I don't know what their means and methods are for doing that at this point in time.
Try to find out before they start?
We can do that.
We'll find out what the repair method is, but as a city, when we've patched concrete streets with asphalt, it does not last.
It doesn't work.
But temporarily, we'll just be looking at it temporarily.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neal, then Mr. Hope.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know if, I have one residential street that's concrete, Stoner Avenue, Stoner Hill. Is that on the list by any chance?
We have, I believe,
Mr. Hall?
Good evening, folks. We haven't clearly identified exactly which streets are in the concrete restoration program at this point in time. We're still doing an evaluation as far as what all the upcoming engineering projects are and the such, so we don't have competing interests on these streets.
Okay, well, if we can keep in mind like we do when we do snow plowing, if it's a hill, we take that into high consideration. So, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Hoke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going off, looking at and hearing about the evaluations, I'd like to see some of that, because I know that last year I asked for evaluations to be done on all the concrete streets in my ward, because I get a lot of complaints pertaining to those and because of the condition. And I know that with the concrete streets, It's a lot more expensive than just resurfacing because you have to tear it completely out and then put it back down. In some fashion, whether you use concrete or whether you go back to asphalt. There was not too long ago, we talked about the airport, and there was going to be a process that was used on the airport runway that was going to grind the concrete, and then it was going to be able to surface over it with asphalt, I believe, and I was wondering, has anybody looked into that? I know when it came through council, and I asked about it, and they said that, well, this is something that's new and something that we can certainly look at. So has there anything else been done as far as looking at that process, or is there such a process?
Mr. Hewitt?
Our runway at the airport presently is asphalt, and we anticipate to grind that and resurface it with asphalt, but there are a couple communities that are on a trial basis trying to investigate whether it's feasible to grind concrete streets and overlay them with asphalt. There's been one or two of those done regionally in the last year, so the jury's still out on whether it's going to be a long-term success, but there are some people that are investigating that now.
Yeah, well, I know with some of the concrete streets, we don't have any long-term time to, think about whether it's going to, work or not. We have to do something with those, and I think every one of our wards have those in it, and it's something that needs addressed, and I don't think $500,000 is going to go very far for any of that. So maybe if we could look at all the aspects of anything that can be done in order to get some of these, either redone, refurbished, and taken care of. We certainly do need it. So I'd appreciate that. And if I can do anything to help, or I certainly will. I know if I put it out on Facebook, I know I'll get a lot of reactions there. So okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Valid point. Sims?
We have only used the permeable concrete. It's pretty expensive to put down, but the permeable concrete has only been used essentially for parking lanes and for some stormwater controls. In the travel lane for arterials or collector streets, we would not recommend using permeable concrete.
Then hold up.
No.
Thank you.
And increased maintenance, a significant amount of increased maintenance.
Gotcha. Very good. Move on to ADA access. Access.
$200,000 of resources would be available to continue our conversion to making sure that our sidewalks are ADA accessible and compliant with federal regulations. Britain Road closeouts, this project is actually completed. This is just $10,000 going for closing that out. Finally, our citywide sidewalk program. This is a program where residents can petition the city for sidewalk improvements. It is all based on homeowners' requests. The amount of $450,000 would cover the requests that were received from May of 2017 through July of 2018, which would cover about 239 addresses across the city.
Ms. Keith?
Can you tell us if that will bring us closer to closing this gap that we've had in doing our sidewalks, and how, if they're on the list, how long they have to wait?
So as of today, we have 365 requests. What's budgeted right now would get us 240, so that would leave a gap of about 120, if my math is 125.
If no more come in at this point?
Correct.
And so we can expect 240 to be done in the year 2019?
Correct.
Okay. Good.
And, that depends on bids as well, what the bids look like.
Sure.
We're anticipating about 240.
Mr. Kilby?
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Helen, is this on now, or?
Okay, mine is green, this one's red. Hey, I was going to ask you something, going back to the ADA access. I'm just wondering, why are we spending $200,000 general obligation debt? Isn't that a federally mandated program? I thought they supplied the funds for the sidewalk, the access. I always thought they paid for that. They don't?
They supply the mandate, but not the funds.
I thought that was funded by them. It never was?
We did receive AMAT's funds years ago for some of that ADA curb ramps, but that's something we can't count on every year.
So what are we required to put one at every single corner eventually? Is that what it says? Some
We've
people
had a
don't like
program
them.
for
All right, thanks.
a long time. Ms. Tomek?
So finally, in terms of transportation. Yes.
Oh, yes, Mr. Moby, sorry.
I'm just curious, when you talk about closeout, and you have $10,000 here for Britton Road, this is what is left as a balance of the contract, or you just put a certain amount to have there just?
When a contract is closed,
Okay.
work is done, and the gap between what was funded in previous years and what needs to be budgeted to fill that gap, we're anticipating $10,000.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So finally, Safe Routes to School, these are annual programs where we coordinate around schools, looking at possible road diets, looking at what makes it safer for kids to go to school. So we're looking at funding a coordinator position, an ongoing coordinator position with the Summit County Department of Health with our 2017 funds, and then an application, I believe that was applied or submitted in 2018. I don't think that was funded, so we are looking at what we need to tweak, and then looking at that, reapplying again, and that'll come back to council as well.
And that's STBG, what does that stand for?
Surface
State
Transportation Block Grant, I think. That's federal funds through AMATs.
Very good, thank you. I knew
So
somebody
now-
would know that off the top of their head.
Now I'm going to hand the mic over to
Mr. Ashley.
Excuse me.
Yes, Ms. Sims, and then Ms. Amobian.
Okay.
On the coordination, the coordinator for Safe Routes to School, are we working with Akron Public Schools?
That is correct.
So, but the position is funded through Summit County Public Health?
That is also correct.
Okay, tell me which part is right. Are they splitting the cost of is this an APS?
The coordinator position is funded through the Summit County Department of Health, but they coordinate their work with Akron Public Schools to identify the safe routes for kids to get to and from their school buildings, whether it's road diets, whether it's signal upgrades, whether it's crosswalks, things of that nature. But the position is actually funded through, was proposed to be funded, that grant, through Summit County Department of Health.
So the grant requires it be funded through Summit County Public Health? We're kind of vetting issues, possibilities with APS.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Amobian?
Yeah. The federal dollars we get for transportation, bridges and so forth, who would have that information, this STBG and all of that? Would that be you?
Within the hard copy of the budget, we do have like a breakdown at the very beginning.
Well, I'm just interested in the various areas, because that's part of the committee that I'm on through NLC, is transportation, infrastructure, and all of that. Just curious as to the dollars that we got in the various areas. Would that, on that page there,
Yeah, it's at the very
that will cover all of it?
At the beginning of the presentation, we did break out what each funding source was
Right.
between local, regional, state, and federal. So I believe STBG is part of the federal resources.
And then the other part that will cover the bridges versus the residential streets and Tiger and all of that, is that broken down separately?
It's in the federal part of it, yes.
Yeah, so, the sheet that Helen has, it shows, every one of those sources are broken down individually. for a subtotal of nearly $43 million of
Right.
federal funds.
Okay, I'll look at that. If I have questions, I'll call you. Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Sims?
Just real quickly, on the 2017 Safe Routes to School dollars, are those carryovers? So we got the 62,000, so what is,
It wasn't funded, so we are looking to reapply. We'll be reapplying.
so, okay, I just want, so what,
I think the confusion is in the names. We're actually building, in 2018, we're actually building the 2015 Safe Routes to School project. So some of these, it's the years that the money was funded, and by the time that the funding was actually achieved, the year that was in the title, it doesn't really match the year that it's actually applied.
okay, so we got it and it may have not been, so technically it could have been a carryover kind of, sort of.
Right.
So are we budgeting that 62,000 this year? In 2019? Plus the 90,000?
We're still working to identify priorities that we can go after the next round of funding, and if successful, we'll bring to council the success and a program identified to continue the program moving forward.
And that would be the 2018 title, but it'd be a 2019 project.
Expenditure.
Thank you.
Correct.
Mr. Swirsky, can you use the microphone, please? Sorry, but people can't hear.
Explain a little bit about the Akron bicycle plan, create bicycle-friendly community.
That's that. Yeah, okay. If we're good with the Safe Routes to School, we can move. Let's go ahead and do Adams Run, then the bicycle plan. How about if we do it chronologically here? Go ahead, Mr. Ashley.
Okay, so we'll move
Then we'll
into
answer your
Parks and Recreation. Adams Run Trail and Greenway, design and construction of a multi-use trail in southeast Akron, which is adjacent to Adams Ditch. Western Reserve Land Conservancy is donating property to in-kind services. We're currently finalizing our ODNR grant agreement. We have land acquisitions required for a new trail alignment, and the appraisals are underway, and the new trail alignment saves the city significant costs. The Akron bicycle plan, that's improvements to...
Oh, yeah, Mr. Kilby,
Okay, sorry. Getting back to Adams Run Trail and Greenway, what's the funding source, Lino or whatever it is?
Clean Ohio.
Clean Ohio.
What is that?
It's Clean Ohio.
Okay, and how much is general obligation?
15,000.
Okay, now, let me just make a statement. I support bicycles, I have bicycles, I ride bicycle trails, but some of the people that live along these bicycle trails see them as an access route for criminals to come into their neighborhoods and rob their houses. Now, I'm serious.
I can...
What people have told me.
Otherwise the road...
Okay, now,
Well, go
my
ahead, Ms.
question
Kilby.
is, who polices
That's a new one.
I mean, the roads, you got cops riding around sometimes, but who offers security on bicycle trails?
I can speak to the overall concern. So that's a very common concern everywhere. I can tell you quite honestly, it's a very unfounded concern by research that trails actually bring up property values and are very safe. That I think sometimes concerns about, people using them to rob homes or so forth, when in reality that's not the most effective way to get, for a thief to get around. So I can't speak to that particular trail in terms of patrol or security, but I did want to just share, there's been a lot of research done on that, and the trails are actually quite safe.
Well, I got some experience, not research. I live close to Talmadge, and when I first moved there 20 years ago, there was something called the Talmadge Hike and Bike Trail, which was a simple crushed limestone path on the old Erie Railroad right-of-way. So Summit County Parks decided to build the Freedom Trail. And there's been a rash of burglaries in that part of Talmadge, and it's close to where I live. So I don't care what the research says, and everyone says people have seen people coming up the path with wagons to steal stuff. Now, and I guess that one there is supposed to be patrolled by the Summit County Parks, Metro Parks, and I've talked to them about it. And but who's gonna patrol ours? Is my question.
Yes. Mr. Hardy?
So APD patrols our trails. They actually have they have small ATVs and others. No, but I would just say that we disagree with your assessment, and we're very pro parks and trails.
Be aware of it.
Yeah.
We need to be aware of what people are saying, and whether, no matter what the research says, this is, perception is important too.
But it's good for folks to know that APD do have small ATV and other smaller vehicles, and they do go onto the trails when there are issues, and they do patrol when there are hotspot issues.
So what is it going to consist of? Is this crushed limestone, or is this asphalt? Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. We're good? Okay, Ms. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, people's experience become really their realities, whether that's real or imagined. So perhaps, Mr. Hardy, that'd be I don't know if we can incorporate it in our new PR around parks, recreations, and that kind of stuff to talk about the safety of the trails. Maybe that would go a long way. It would kind of help to mitigate some of the concern that some of the residents might have.
Very good. And anyone else? Are we okay? Oh, Mr. Neal.
Just in the general conversation here, and if we could also get what some of the best practices are using technology to monitor those areas as well, because I know there's different type of lighting and things that people put out that also act as cameras. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Now we can move on to the Akron Parks Challenge. Mr. Ashley.
Skip the bike plans covered then?
Yeah.
Okay, the Akron Parks Challenge, design and construction of recommended park improvements identified by the Akron Parks Collaborative through the Akron Parks Challenge Grant Program. This past year, we had 3 awards given to Cadillac Triangle, Chestnut Ridge Park, and Reservoir Park. And the slide that's shown there is the proposed community built playground at Chestnut Ridge Park.
Very good. President Somerville?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, do we suspect Knight Foundation being able to help again this year?
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Don't have a dollar amount, but they are very interested.
Okay, Bolt Street Fitness.
As you know, the gym has recently been remodeled for the I Promise School. This work primarily is to improve the boiler at the center. Other spaces that may also be used by I Promise. The majority of this funds will be to replace the boiler.
In reference to that, what the roof? I know a couple years ago it was in really poor condition. I think we threw some money at it. I'm just curious what the status is. Reference to roof at Balch Street. Is it overall replaced? Do we replace it overall, Mr. Valley?
That was replaced a couple years ago.
Okay.
The entire roof.
I know it was an issue a couple years back, so glad we took care of it. Good news.
The Canal Park Stadium improvements, this is upgrade stadium lighting to meet Major League Baseball standards. It has been awarded to Lake Erie Electric, and they hope to have it fully operational by the end of March.
Very good. CPRF stands for?
Canal Park Revenue Funds.
Excellent. Mr. Neal?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just because we're talking about lighting at Canal Park, in here, has there been any further discussion about lighting at Summit Lake, the Summit Lake ball field?
It's not included in the 2019 budget, but it has always been discussed, and it's in our 5-year plan still to look at doing that.
If we can determine what it is we can do to step that up, I mean, with all the investment at Summit Lake, and if you talk to people who know anything about softball in this area, that was the crown jewel softball field. I think we need to step that one up.
And to address that, I can't promise anything at this point, but there has been a lot of interest in public space around Summit Lake with the Civic Commons project, and so if more funding were to materialize through that in the future, that might be a potential funding source we could bring into the ball fields as well as other space around the lake.
Okay.
Yeah, and then one last thing. I see the part where we have for Park and Rec, almost $4 million. Does that include the grants and things that we get as well? Is that all from local government that has been allocated for Park and Rec?
It includes grants.
Can we get an idea of if we extract out the grants, how much is actually coming from taxpayer dollars in that regard? Don't need it now, but at some point to know exactly how much we're funding as a city.
Okay. Very good. If you can get back to all of council. Ms. Sims?
Just a point of interest for me, I too was going to ask the same question about the ballparks in the community, particularly Summit Lake, so hopefully we can get that on the radar. But I know we've leveraged a lot of resources from the Akron Parks Challenge. Do you know what that amount is? I know of a reservoir, just...
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be good to know how much we've kind of leveraged as a result of having these park challenges.
Yeah, that's a
I know
good
the
point.
news is good.
We will quantify that, but
Yeah.
I will tell you that our investment was met with a
Yeah.
whole bunch of others. So, yep, we'll get that number.
So, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Mr. Ashley, now we're on to Glendale Steps, I believe?
Yes. At the rehabilitation of Glendale Steps, we're working on a detailed plan, efforts for beautification and lighting at Glendale. The gorge dam removal, contaminated sediments. We have ODNR and US EPA grant design management for the contaminated sediment removal, which is needed to proceed with the gorge dam. And right now, once the gorge dam is removed, it would create 60 miles of free-flowing river from Lake Erie to Lake Rockwell. The city portion in this will be the sediment will be piped to city-owned land within Cascade Valley Park, which is about 1.5 miles downstream.
I'm sure there's going to be more discussion on that.
Yes. Yeah, this is the first step. In order to get with the removal of the dam, we have to take care of the contaminated sediments that sit behind the...
Exactly. Lock 3 Park?
Lock 3 Park, this is repairs at Lock 3 Park, and it's through the plan that was funded by Akron Civic Commons.
Okay.
Mason Park Ball Fields is regrading an existing ball field area. This is a carryover project. We had a scope meeting in November 14th at the site. Backstop fencing was removed last year. The next step will be to remove the dirt infields and regrade for football.
Very good. Mr. Neal?
I probably have to defer to my colleague, Ms. Samples, but I see the ball fields. Were the football fields or were those already upgraded? Okay. So, when you say that's next, you mean it's in another budget cycle, or is it in a budget cycle that we've already passed? This is the carryover from last year or 2 years ago? So that's the kind of thing, if we could get an idea, like how do we keep track of those kind of carryovers so that we don't lose track of it? Because I mean, if it's not in this budget, where are those dollars showing up? And I ask because I know that's been a request out there for a while. You know, not just at that park, but there's been some other ones. So.
Yeah, I think we have, we do have them all tracked in the budget. I mean, if you wanted to see a summary of those, we could provide that.
Yeah, just where, you know, where we would be able to see them. Because if it's, like, is it in this, is it in these budget dollars? That's in this one?
Yes.
So the carryover for doing that part of the
Yeah,
park?
because the project did not proceed, they didn't, when we issued debt, that wasn't included as one of the projects.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, if we have a project that straddles 2 years, we account for it in the draft capital budget that's prepared. So that's why you'll see some of these carryovers in here.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ashley?
in miscellaneous parks and community centers, these are small capital improvements at various city parks and community centers. In 2018, projects included Kaboom Build Playground at Prentice Park, Bald Street pool repairs, Joy Park at Davis gym floor resealing, Davenport Park swings and slide, Perkins Pool Bathhouse improvements, and as well as the Firestone Park Pavilion restoration from fire damage. Reservoir.
Thank you. Do we currently have some projects slated for this year, for 2019? And is the IT, what's the IT? What is IT?
Income tax.
That's it. So these are not issue $4, it's just
No,
income tax?
Just straight income tax. And we work with a neighborhood assistance, building maintenance, parks maintenance, Office of Integrated Development on
To determine the
preparing
project?
those. Yes,
Okay.
if you have projects you'd like to be considered, just let us know, and we'll investigate that and see if it fits the parameters of this program.
Like lighting at the ball? No.
That doesn't.
This is more like, holy crap, something just broke, we need to fix it. That's not a technical term for the line item.
I was going to ask you to explain that.
Reservoir parking areas, this is improvements. From the Akron Parks Challenge, one of the items they felt was a big concern was parking, but we felt that that shouldn't be what the funds were for. It's our responsibility as a city to maintain our parking lots.
So
we're working, so we budgeted money this year to address some of the concerns they had with parking, so they could earmark their funds to other elements at the park.
So that's, you're talking about the parking lot specifically, the southern parking lot, or?
The southern parking lot, there was, well, the main lot would be, there's the condition of it, needs to be resurfaced. And then the
Indeed.
northeast lot, there's security issues there.
Yes.
That we're looking into.
Okay.
And then the other lot on the
On the west side, yep.
That was not addressed during the meetings, but I'm sure we'll look into that. But this was
Very
just
good.
our way of using some city funds instead of taking away grant dollars.
Okay,
To address
cool.
concerns.
Mr. Chairman, just to
Yes,
add to
Mr.
Mr.
Hardy.
Ashley, when we heard that from the residents, we actually worked with APD, and that particular parking lot is a high crime area based upon their data, so we felt it was compelling enough to make a go of
And I
it.
think the cage is still up. I would recommend taking that down.
That's been removed.
It's been, okay, good. Very good. Cool. Very good. Rubber City Heritage Trail, another.
This would be for Phase 1 construction. This is that multi-use recreational trail linking Akron neighborhoods, East End, Kenmore, downtown, Ellett, and University. As you can see on the map, this would be at the southeast end of the project, would be our first. And that would be from 3rd Avenue to Johnson Street, and right now we're seeking grant funding for that project.
Whatever council can do with regards to this, you know we'll be ready to help and assist.
Thank you.
Ms. Sims?
So for this $630,000, what portion of that is general operating?
I mean, general
We have
obligation.
GO of $100,000 in that, and we're seeking grant. These aren't committed yet, but we're looking for Clean Ohio funds and other funds from
ODNR.
Yes.
Half of it through ODNR. Public space security cameras.
Okay, this is to add additional security cameras at city parks and community centers and great streets. This was set up to establish a funding source to address deficiencies, and we've had a lot of concerns this past year at Firestone Park, and this is a way that we can get communications, a look at it, but now they have a funding source to draw from that we can
Excellent.
prioritize.
Very good.
So we would hope to continue this
I
program.
applaud this effort, Ms. Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this specifically for one park, or do we have several parks in mind?
Well, it's set, the first park we'll look at is Firestone Park, but it could be multiple sites. And again, that also includes community centers and great streets. But this is just, like I said, to give us a source to draw from.
So the only reason I'm asking, I think because we've asked for similar kind of infrastructure near the parks, even off Copley Road. And I know we've
Those are going to be addressed through a night grant that we have. We still have that, about $132,000 in the night IoT grant for, we've prioritized public safety for Copley Road and actually another section in Ward 5.
So does that show up in the capital or no?
No, we got that award, I think, in 2017, and we just now finalized, we're working with Brian Harding and Mark Pettit on a plan for cameras. But to Jim's point, many of you request cameras at city community centers or parks, and Malcolm, I see, is out there, and he does a great job trying to get out there. We didn't have a funding source, and so the mayor felt it was important to have dollars set aside just for the repair, purchase, maintenance, and upkeep of security cameras at the community centers and at parks. So if we have an issue during the year, we can address it quickly.
So is the bulk of the funds for installation of new cameras or for maintenance of old ones?
Well, that hasn't been determined at this time. Like, we'll work with Malcolm on the cost. So this will get us started, but
Could be both.
the amount hasn't been determined.
Could be both, depending on
Yeah,
what the need
because I
is.
know some community centers already have that infrastructure there, but may have to expand and may have to evaluate, is what I'm guessing, correct?
So I guess the other question is, I know, Mr. Hardy, you just talked about the reservoir and how you had the data that showed that there was some pretty active mischief in some parts of it. So is that how we determined Firestone Park was? I was just trying to figure out how we're determining which locations need it.
Yeah, I mean,
Is this-
Councilman Kamer can chime in here, but we did have several break-ins at Firestone Park, or John, and there was a need to replace and repair and add cameras there, but it's really a need-based thing. We haven't had it conceptualized in the capital budget before, and again, the mayor felt it was important enough. We get these requests a lot, so it's a start.
Very good. Mr. Kamer?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to echo what Mr. James Hardy was saying. I think this should be a yearly thing. I mean, whatever we can do as council to expand this program. I mean, a lot of our centers do have cameras currently, but we need to expand. We need to fix the outdated equipment and et cetera. And I think this is a line item that we need to embrace and support. Obviously, I know we're talking about Firestone Park, but next year we won't be talking about Firestone Park. We could be talking about another community center. So this is a line item that I think is very important for all our centers and our public parks. So
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Valley had a comment, and then Mr. Neal, then Mr. Kilby.
We are hoping to look at Firestone Park, like we've already talked about, Ed Davis, Reservoir, hopefully in this order. It may take a couple years to get to the others. Patterson Park, Ellett. We want to add the Northwest Community Center, Joy Park, and Kenmore. That's our wish list over the next 2 or 3 years.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Valley. Mr. Neal, and then Mr. Kilby, and then Mr. Swirsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things come to mind with this recent point of discussion that we're having with the capital budget. One is we're talking a lot about, implementing technology and things of that nature. But I know the administration may have, but from the council standpoint, we've never done had a comprehensive presentation or done research to see how communities are using and leveraging their technology to address these different issues. I mean, in some areas, I'll use since we mentioned the reservoir, there may be a plan to work with businesses and residents there to network their systems to do a more comprehensive surveillance of that area. Some communities are doing that. But if we don't have that discussion, we may be making a purchase or making an investment that could be leveraged to go a lot further if we understood how other communities are using that. So I'd like to encourage us. I know I mentioned this before. My colleague, Councilwoman Amobi, and I met with a city that was doing just that type of thing, and I'm going to ask them to give us a presentation. But I think it's just, things are moving so fast, we need to. I mean, I've been just looking here locally at some of, not so much on cameras, but just looking at how some of our colleagues to the north and the north of us and surrounding communities have been leveraging technology and bringing in legislation to deal with everything from the 5G we've talked about to just implementing Wi-Fi in certain areas. This is somewhat different, but I know in my community, I've asked for some assistance for businesses that put in, security cameras just on their entrance-ways that could be networked, because one business was doing that, and before we made the investment, that was the only camera that the city had in that area. So if we can network some of those, and if any of you follow Nextdoor, the link that people want, some neighbors are talking about that. Matter of fact, I even had a meeting where a resident brought his videotape so that people could see what was going on. So I think it just behooves us to make that kind of investment in a discussion to see how we can use it. And then this other thing, and I cannot let this escape me. I look at the significant investment we're talking about making as a city, and the one about technology comes to mind because I have a business in my ward on Copley Road that does technology. I think we have some businesses in our community that do a lot of this type of stuff. I'm hoping that, and we've had this discussion, that we look at one, Akron first, and then two, as we look at Akron first with some of these investments that are going to take place, that we look at how can we be more inclusive with the businesses in our community. I mean, we've had the Elevate Akron report. I don't think we cannot look at anything like this without saying how are we being,
Cameras.
Well, no,
I know what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying, I'm talking about cameras and budget.
I understand, sir, but I guess this is my concern. We have these conversations, and there's so much that comes before us. I'm hoping that as we finalize this capital budget, with it, we have an equitable component that shows what our strategic plan is to make sure that we are Akron first and making the participation more inclusive with everybody.
Okay. Mr.
Very
Hardy?
quickly, on the cameras, we are thinking about how to link them up, not necessarily in that way, although we could, but I see Deputy Mayor Brown out there. I know that as we look to, and I don't want to jump ahead, hopefully an eventual new Stubbs Justice Center and elevated technology, we have been investigating other cities such as Detroit who have the Green Light program as to how we leverage not just security cameras, but traffic cameras into a public safety setting. So it's definitely something we're thinking about. And then on the equity piece, I know Ms. Miller-Dawson had a presentation we had to cut for time today, but we will be bringing that to council in terms of supplier diversity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Mr. Kilby, then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The security at community centers is really important. I support cameras, but getting back to these here trails, bicycle trails, which I support bicycle trails, but they close at dark, at midnight. I've been in contact with Summit County Metro Parks, and I asked them if they could put some security cameras on the Freedom Trail. Now, not just cameras that document crime, how about motion detectors? If somebody's walking up that trail at night, what are they doing there? Somebody should be alerted, and maybe a flash goes off and they get their picture taken. Now, as far as, there's been 2 people in my ward that were victimized by burglars coming up from the Freedom Trail and breaking into the back of their houses this last summer. And one of them is former Fire Chief Tom Alexander, who lives on Chapman Drive, and his neighbor. So I don't agree with the research. With all due respect, Mr. Segedy, it all depends where this is. If it's a middle-class neighborhood close to a poor neighborhood, it's likely someone's going to be using that as access to victimize some people. But so I think motion detectors are important. I don't know how much they cost, but I think it's money well spent.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Swirsky.
I was just asking if we have a new camera at Highland Square. Along with getting the camera, there has to be some thought about who's going to monitor the camera. And it's got to be part of, it sounds like Mr. Hardy's already on this, but part of a whole system. Otherwise, you just sort of, after there's a crime, then you're looking at the camera to see who did what. But if we could have cameras that were more preventative oriented with a monitoring system, and if it's done kind of aggregated the way Mr. Hardy was talking about, that sounds like a real advantage.
Thank you. West Akron Ball Fields.
Akron Ball Fields. This is a carryover item for design and construction of additional softball, baseball fields in West Akron, given the development at Perkins Middle School. This past year, we've worked with Wobble, Department of Neighborhood Assistance, and Metro Parks on a solution. The plan is to upgrade 3 existing ball fields at Erie Island Sports Complex that are currently underutilized.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the West Akron ball fields, are we talking Erie Island too? Or just,
Those would be the ones that we would improve, that Wobble would use. They currently do not use those fields.
Yeah, as Jim mentioned, we've talked to Wobble extensively, and we've talked with the Department of Neighborhood Assistance and Metro Parks, and it looks like we can provide the capacity for youth baseball at Erie Island, which is great, because that way we can upgrade those fields and not have to build new fields, because as you might recall, when we inventoried baseball fields, overall, we have a glut of baseball fields citywide, which has led to some of the things like at Mason, trading out baseball for football.
because I think we had a youth group to come down recently, their representatives, they had gotten some lighting that was donated but needed assistance helping to put the lighting up.
I'm sorry, I didn't, were you asking about putting lighting up at the field?
Yeah, so there has been some requests from some youth organizations that do utilize, like Erie Island, in wanting to do games in the evening, but lighting was an issue, but had some donated lighting. And
Do you recall what youth group that was?
which youth baseball team plays at Erie Island?
There's only one, that's West Akron Little League, but I don't know if it was West Akron Little League or if it was a West Pee Wees.
There's little people. So, you know, I only say that to say, I don't, you know, if they have, maybe there's something we can do to kind of support that. We're not buying the equipment. If it's good equipment, maybe that's something we can do to help install so that they can begin to do that.
We can certainly look into that, but
Okay,
it's
I will get that
our,
person-
okay,
yeah,
if you
I
could,
will
it's
do
our
that.
understanding that West Akron Little League is no longer, that they're no longer in operation.
Oh, no, they're in operation.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very much in
Okay.
operation. Yeah.
So we'll look into that, if you can get that information
I
to
will.
us.
Thank you.
Quick, because we're running out of time.
I'm happy to hear that improving the Erie Island fields, both groups, Wobble and Wall, have been consulted. Because when I saw this, I thought we were talking about the field at Forest Lodge, but that's already taken care of?
Yeah, that was an alternative, but, you know, in a perfect world, we'd hope to try to make best use of the fields that we already have, so Mr. Ashley could provide more details, but yeah, it's my understanding we've talked with both Wall and Wobble to coordinate how those fields are scheduled and utilized.
What I would like, and I want to speak to Mr. Valley on this, because there's some soft skill stuff that I think it can do that could really benefit that whole area, and if we could talk about that concession stand that's there. Maybe putting a little bit more investment in there and creating a collaborative between all the groups that use that field so that everybody could benefit, because I can see that being some of the way we used to do business with our fields is whoever maintained the field had the concession stand, they own the concession stand. But since we are evolving to, more demands on fields, I think we have to look at some of those agreements and see how we can make sure that everybody benefits.
All right, very good. Thank you. Now we'll move on to public facilities. Mr. Ashley. Ms. Amobian.
Just a quick question. It sounds like you eliminated, is that just one ball field at Perkins? I know it's on the side, I know it's utilized, is that?
There are actually 3, but
Okay.
this will make up for all 3.
It will?
Yeah.
Someone's gonna do the scheduling and all of that?
Yeah, that's something that the Department of Neighborhood Assistance has worked with the leagues on, but we should have the capacity to make up for all 3 fields that would be lost.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Mr. Ashley.
Okay, airport rehab aprons A and B. This is to rehab the aprons around the operations building and fueling area. The airport rehab runway 725 electrical. The funding for this is expected to be available in spring of 2019. the Akron Municipal Courthouse. This is the design of a new courthouse at the Ocasek Government Building.
I have a question, please.
Yes, oh, Ms. Amobian?
Could you help me understand, do we own Ocasek now, or are we in the process of acquiring it?
Mr. Hardy?
We're in the process of acquiring it, so we've been in a, yes, ma'am.
So do we have any idea what the maintenance plan is?
We
Or
do.
what-
We do. We've received that information from the state. We've also received all the information on the cost of operations as is.
Could we see it?
Yes. We will, as we said before, this particular project and specifically, we will need to come back to council for the authorization to move forward. We're hoping the state legislature has authorized the acquisition. The governor has signed that bill. So at this point, we're working on terms of that. So that would all have to come back to council.
Okay, but my question is, are we going to have this information before we approve all of this stuff?
Yes, you will.
In terms of what we need to be, okay, because this $100,000 sounds like a drop in the bucket.
My guess is Mr. Hewitt can elaborate, but I think it's just to finish the design this year for the courthouse in the Ocasek building, not the actual construction costs. Those would be handled separately.
Ms. Samples?
Yeah, that is correct. So our intent right now is we finalize negotiations with the state to take ownership of the building. We'll work on all those costs associated as part of the negotiations of the building. The $100,000 is essentially for our architect and engineering firm to complete the layout of the court space within the building so that we can actually then put it out to bid to get a contractor to build the actual renovations within inside the building.
And this is the entire municipal court system? All
correct.
6 courts or whatever we have.
That is correct.
over
Yes,
there
ma'am.
is going on there. Are we taking all the other employees out of the building?
This is going to be a very unique project where the state employees will stay within the building as we renovate the interior of the building.
Okay. So we're going to be able to have municipal court there eventually and the departments that we currently have over there?
That's correct.
I think, are you referring to city departments?
Yeah.
So the city departments that will stay in our current preliminary, and Mr. Hewitt, correct me if I'm wrong, but the civil division will stay of the law department, so the law department will be together with criminal for the first time. Pretty much everything else is going to have a different home. And then the whole front side of the building, it'll almost feel like 2 different buildings when you're inside of it. The front side will be 100% occupied by the state. So there'll be state offices and then the courthouse. That's how the building will be set
And
up.
no one else is there?
The only people that will be staying that are currently there in the current designs are the civil division of the law department.
Oh, okay.
All right. We okay here? Any other questions?
Oh, thank you.
Just a quick question on, just go, on airport rehab and airport, the first 2, why are we using the TIF here? Is the public, are we on public facilities?
Yeah, we haven't started just yet, so almost.
Okay.
Now, I think Samples had a question, then I think Ms.
I
Amobian?
just, a quick one, we were still on courts, and I just had a question about the final design of the new courthouse. So when Judge Oldfield was the administrative court judge, prior to her going to common pleas, I thought we had already done a design, budget for design, and now we're doing it again?
It was Morley Health Center, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to
but-
understand, so now we just scratch that? We're not even gonna look at their previous design and
Oh, no, we
pay?
looked at it.
I'm just trying to understand, it seems like there's some money
So I
being
can-
wasted here.
I can take a crack at it, and then Mr. Hewitt's going to correct all my issues or elaborate. Essentially, what you approved earlier was the complete, was a design and site of a new building at the old Morley Health Center. As we got into it, we were approaching a $30 million price tag, and that was with cutting programming out of the court. And so we got to a point with the court collaboratively where it was not tenable, and Mr. Hewitt can explain more of the details. So the mayor felt that it was worth at least asking the state if they would consider the Ocasek building, which was always considered, as you know, an option, and much to our surprise and happiness, they were willing to look at this. And so, Mr. Hewitt, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Please, Mr. Hewitt.
Well, That is correct. So, the design is similar to what I explained about Ocasek, as a design and build. So we didn't develop a full design for the building. We took the design to 30%, and then we put it on the street as a design and build process to hire a contractor to finish the design and then do the construction. Based on the fact that we were tearing an existing building down on top of a parking deck, the structural integrity of the parking deck, reworking the interior of the deck for prisoner drop-off, for the secured parking for the judges, the structural integrity of building a brand-new building on it. The Ohio Basic Building Codes have changed since that garage was originally built, so none of the column spacing actually works. So James is right, we were approaching 30 or exceeding $30 million. So it was deemed to be, not fundable. So that's why we changed gears and we started the process of acquiring the Ocasek building, to put it in the Ocasek building. The article that was in the paper just recently showed that we can actually build within Ocasek for $5 million or $7 million less than what we were anticipating building at Morley. So it's a better project for the city.
And that includes the clerk of courts as well, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
It would be all of the courts, the clerk's office, probation, and the ancillary services that go with the courts.
So, yeah, do you recall during 2015, we did talk about the security feature that everyone was kind of concerned about, and we did talk about that, having a parking structure underneath the Justice Center, if you will, so that's kind of a thing. Ms. Amovian, did you have something?
Well, I'm just curious, now that you've said all of this, what are you going to do with the parking deck over there that's crumbling? I'm going to tear it down, or can we retrofit it, or whatever you need to do?
It'll still remain an active parking garage. We still have monthly parkers in there. We'll be marketing it to additional monthly parkers.
Are you going to do some major repairs?
No, the structural dimensions I meant were to support a new building on top.
I know what you're talking about, but I'm talking about, well, the parking garage itself has had some serious issues, because you've had to close it a time or two.
I think that, as you get in here, I think there's a parking deck line item for parking deck maintenance, but we don't have anything this year scheduled for significant structural repairs in that garage.
So we're going to tear the other part of the building down?
I think that's still something that we're looking at, what the future of the actual Morley Health Center building would be, so I'd say stay tuned on that.
Yeah. Very good. Before we start into public facilities here, I'm going to let everyone know that we will not get through what we had hoped for today. We may have to schedule an additional day to go through this, but what we'll do today is just soldier on and bookmark where we stop, which will be about 11:45, just to give everyone time to kind of decompress. But before we start into public facilities, Ms. Sims has a question.
So just a quick question, Mr. Hardy, maybe you can answer this question. So on the Harold K. Stubbs building, there's an estimated price on it for demolition at $10 million, I think I read, something to that effect. Is that something we're looking at, how we're going to fund that in the immediate or 5 years from now, or have we forecasted that out? I know it took us forever to get to Rubber Bowl, and Royal Acres was not a breeze, and so now we will have the Harold K. Stubbs building.
So I think there's a lot of steps that need to take place as it relates to the Stubbs Justice Center process, and I know we'll get to that here, but safe to say that that particular price tag, we estimate as just the asbestos abatement. So that's not even demoing the building. So I don't have, standing here today, a good answer for that question, but it's a question we're going to have to answer eventually, because as I'm sure the guy, Captain Harding can tell you, I mean, I think all of us can agree the Stubbs Justice Center has lived its useful life. The question is, what do we do now with moving into a more technologically focused, Justice Center? I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we're going to look at it, and we're going to find an answer to it, but there's no easy answers to a building that has that much asbestos in it.
Thank you. Very good. Now, speaking of such, we'll move into the public facilities piece, I believe. Did we already begin? Where are we at right now, then? Okay, good.
Okay, this is the upgrade, the LED lighting on levels 3, 4, and 5.
Go ahead.
That was the first question. I thought we weren't on public facilities. I asked about the two, Cascade Park. It was the initial two. So the use of TIF dollars here. at the airport?
Yeah, so the FAA money that we're getting for those projects has a local match, and the businesses that located in and around the airport have been paying TIF to the city, but that TIF is restricted for use in that airport zone, so we figured this was a good use of that TIF money to satisfy our local match for the FAA money that we're getting.
So, and that's the same applicable for ODOT money too? So one is TIF and ODOT, one is TIF.
The ODOT is funding the bulk of the project, but there's a local match.
20,000.
Yeah, maybe I'm mixing up the FAA and the ODOT, but yes, both of them have a local match, I believe.
So it allows you to kind of expand your reach a little more? Or is that
Well, they require, and maybe Mr. Hewitt knows the specifics of the local match more than I do, but it's typically the ODOT and the FAA grants have a 5 or 10% local match on them.
Yeah, and I think what Steve's saying, he can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the TIF that's already being collected, we can use some of that, and it forgoes the need to bring in income tax or debt to make that local match.
So the existing TIF can just offset some of the, okay.
Correct.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Mr. Ashley, we're counting on you.
Okay. The Cascade Garage Fan Room Restoration, that project is a carryover. It was bid several times last year, but a contract has now been awarded on January 7th at Comfort Station Controls for $265,000. Customer service build-out is the build-out at the Job Center at 1040 East Talmadge Avenue for customer service, and it will also include the new utility bill payment kiosk. Dan Street lighting, there's 185 fluorescent lights that will be replaced with LED lighting. Fire station number 2, this is a 3-bay fire station at 952 East Exchange. Completion, I have it scheduled for late July. Fire station number 4, this is miscellaneous improvements to complete the structure. It's a 6-bay station at 81 West Thornton Street. Construction funded through the Development Finance Agency. Fire station number 12.
Miss President Somerville.
I was just wondering, can we get the total cost of replacement on station number 4?
Okay,
we can provide that.
Very good. Mr. Ashley.
Fire station number 12 is for the design of the 3-bay facility to replace fire station number 12, which was located at 1852 West Market Street. Engineering is currently doing site analysis, and they're looking at geotech and wetland issues to putting the new station off of South Hawkins Street.
Ms. Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we assume that this station will be built on the same property, or are we looking at another plot?
Yeah, we're looking at the plot at the corner of Westgate and South Hawkins, and so that's what Jim referred to, that's where some of the geotechnical and wetlands analysis is being done.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
But next to Swenson, I thought was going to this.
Samovian.
I'm sorry. I thought that is the land where Mr. Tober was building this apartment.
I think that's
This would be right next door.
Right there.
Yeah, so this
Oh,
is
that same
one
one?
parcel north.
Just to let everybody know, I'm trying to introduce everyone because people can't hear whenever they're watching.
I'm sorry, thank you. I
So that's why I
appreciate
try
that.
to recognize everyone.
I hear that, I'm sorry, thank you. But I thought, did he test the land? I thought he was testing the land because we thought it was kind of swampy.
Yeah,
And so neighbors were complaining that when someone tried to do something on that land before, it created a water problem.
That's
for
what
folks down.
engineering's doing right now, so they're doing that testing as we speak.
So that's going to cover both projects?
Well, no, Mr. Tober's doing his own, but,
It's the same lot, isn't it?
no, it's two different types of buildings, so
Oh.
Mr. Hewitt could probably
Thank you very
explain the
much.
details better than I can.
They close though.
Yeah, the Tober property's on the corner of Alden and Hawkins. And then the
Yes.
fire station would be on the corner of Westgate and Hawkins, so they're set next door to each other. The Tober building is a much tall, it's a high-rise building,
Right.
where the fire station's a one-story construction. So the
Okay.
foundation's
No
will be
basement.
a little different. But, yeah,
No basement.
Tober did his own geotech and study of what he needs to support his building, and we're doing ours now to make sure that the site can support what we need and that there's not wetlands that we'd have to deal with.
Okay.
And as Councilman Fusco said, no basement
There's
in
not
this
going to be
station.
basements.
No
What
basement.
did you say?
No basements in these new fire stations, no basements.
What about the apartment building?
I can't.
There were neighbors that complained at a meeting about the water problem when someone was thinking about building something before. And they lived down the street somewhere, and they had some concerns and questions, but no one was there to answer them.
I can't answer that.
I know he's continuing to work with the neighbors on that.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Mr. Neal, it was Mr. Neal's meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Onward and upward.
Fire Station Facility Improvement Program. This line item is a consolidation of several smaller line items that we've shown in past years. It includes repairs to fire station kitchens, HVAC systems, overhead doors, generators, and parking lots. The gray stone roof replaces existing roof system that has multiple levels there. This past year, they did a repair, building maintenance oversaw it, and they have a plan to continue to do improvements at Greystone.
Okay.
Municipal building elevator rehab. This is a study to upgrade and modernize our municipal building elevator, given the increase in staffing in the muni building due to consolidations.
Mr. Milkovich has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. $100,000 for a study, that seems like a lot of money. Who's going to be providing that study? And don't the elevator companies such as Otis, do they provide you with the...
Building maintenance will be working with them, and this will actually be going towards whatever final design there is. It's to work with that company and then to come up with a final cost, and then we would proceed.
Okay, great.
It won't cost $100,000 just for the study.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Ms. Sims? I'm sorry. Samples. I'm sorry. It's been a long afternoon.
So I have a question about the elevator rehab. For someone who's worked in that building for many years, I can't even count how many times these elevators have broken down, and it just seems redundant that we keep spending all this money on elevators. Are we not moving the police station to Ocasek? Are they not going to Ocasek?
Are you talking about Stubbs?
We're talking about a different building.
This is this
Is that
building.
a different page?
We'll get to
'Cause
that.
I'm ahead of
Yeah,
you.
that's all right.
'Cause I just,
It's all right.
I have elevators.
That'll give me a couple extra minutes. We'll think about that.
We have plenty of elevators with troubles.
It's coming.
Municipal building elevator at $100,000. So it is. But it's also going toward repair as well. So, and there was a study to upgrade and modernize municipal. So that's study and modernize. So
the same, Jim?
Go ahead,
So
Ms.
the
Simpson.
same person that's doing the study is also doing the repairs? So it's not a bidding that out, just,
Well, building maintenance is working with a company to give us what has to be done. So, I mean, if they have to go to Board of Control, have to go to council to approve that company. But
Eventually,
they'll come in and look at it and give you a detailed cost. And we wanted the line item in here now so we can get them in and they can give us the detailed cost. And I'm not sure if there'll be a fee associated with that or not.
thank you.
Okay, plumbing upgrade.
And this is just upgrade and modernize plumbing lines and fixtures within the municipal building. The municipal service center, miscellaneous improvements. This work would include key card access and doors and gates, block heaters for the diesel trucks, LED lighting upgrades for energy management.
Parking decks.
Parking deck improvements. For city-owned parking decks, we're looking at doing waterproofing, sealing, joint repair, lighting upgrades, and facade repairs.
Call center. Yes, Ms. Simovian.
Two questions. Did you identify the parking decks that you're improving upon? Or is it all of them?
They'll be looking at all of those.
And $100,000?
Haven't been earmarked for a specific parking deck at this time.
I can't hear you, sir.
The funds haven't been identified for a specific parking deck at this time. So we'll be working with building maintenance and engineering.
So this is basically to identify the ones that are in need and what they need?
And make improvements. I mean, there's a lot that can be done as far as waterproofing, sealing, could be done as part of this. So it isn't just a study, it's actually we can do improvements.
But you haven't identified the parking decks you're talking
No,
about?
that's part of the program.
Okay. And going back up to your elevator rehab, is that, you said that should be and, not a slash. You're going to study the upgrade and modernize the elevators with this
Yes.
$100,000?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Now that, I want to make clear, that doesn't mean $100,000 will totally upgrade these elevators.
Sure.
But it's to get us to find out what we need to modernize them.
Okay.
And we'll have a final cost.
And when you have more than one elevator in a structure, it sounds like what we've heard in the past, that you got to do all of them at the same time, or both of them, or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
The call center upgrade, this is upgrading the call center for their 24/7 operations and dispatch. We're looking at carpet, window blinds, call talking, and dispatch consoles. The carpet's over 25 years old, as well as the window blinds. And then we have a slide of that up on the screen. for
Call
you.
center?
Yes. This shows the current conditions. The next three projects are required. This is again with the Stubbs Justice Center being 52 years old. This is just to continue their operation. So we have asbestos abatement, electrical upgrade, and elevator upgrade. And this elevator upgrade is to replace all the hoistway door mechanics. And that project is ready to bid.
Very good.
So, Mr. Chairman, now I can answer the question from the councilwoman. So, first of all, obviously the asbestos abatement and electrical upgrade, I mean, that's just to fix the stuff that falls down from the ceiling, and I'm not making that up. The elevator upgrade is, as Mr. Ashley said, it's just so that they work on a daily basis. So we're not, to answer your question, the next line item, not to jump ahead of Mr. Ashley, is all about taking this year, we're going to go through a formal RFQ, RFP process that Mr. Hewitt's bureau is going to lead us in to source consultant or consultants that can work with public safety and the police department to identify what would it take to build a new Stubbs Justice Center and where could we possibly do it. So we're going to hopefully have potential sites, potential costs, potential designs based upon 21st century police departments. So I can't stand here today and say for certain that police department's moving out of Stubbs, but I think everyone that has to be in that building would hope and pray that at some point we're going to stand here and say we're going to get out of Stubbs, but this is the start.
Very good.
Thank you for
Yes,
that,
Ms.
Mr.
Santos.
Hardy. So I'm just sitting here doing all the calculations, and I know it says 550,000 of it would go towards preliminary design costs and site analysis, and when you add everything else up, it's like 685,000. I think from the first day I came to council, I've always said, when are we going to get them a new police station? For someone who worked over there for many years, I just think they deserve better, and anything we can do to try to move them in our lifetime would be great, just because of just the condition of that building. And my last question is, the same people that we're using to fix the elevators, are they the ones giving us an analysis on our elevator? Because it's just weird. It just seems like the elevator every other week is broke. They may have one elevator, then you have an elevator in the back where the judges are, and sometimes they're coming up with inmates, and it just seems odd that there's just elevators broke all the time, and if they're the same people servicing them or telling us that something's wrong.
Mr. Hardy?
So I cannot answer. I defer to Mr. Hewitt on the elevator question, but I think just a point of clarification. So the $550,000 is not the cost of the study. The study will actually be much less than that. It's to start a fund, much like the fund that the court has started long ago, to eventually service the debt payments or things of that nature on a new facility.
Okay.
But I defer to Mr. Hewitt on the elevator question.
All right, thank you, Mr.
I think the issue with the elevators is that they're 52 years old and they need replaced. We're putting Band-Aids on them to keep them operational. So it's not uncommon to have elevator companies help you identify what needs to be repaired, because they're the experts and we're not. It's just unfortunate, they are at the end of their useful life, or they probably have been at the end of their useful life for a while. And that's why, we've constantly had issues with them.
And the budgetary priorities with Stubbs, as you can probably imagine, is since we're creating this fund, and the idea would be every year we put funding into it, we don't want to spend more than one penny than we need to keep that building going, but we still need to have an adequate level of service, so the elevators have to work and so forth.
Mr. Kilby?
So how many elevators are there? Just 2 for the public, right? Is there other elevators that the police use? There's 3? So how much do we estimate it would cost to replace the elevators? How much do we have?
I'm not going to replace them, though. I don't think we're going to replace them, right?
I know, but if we did want to
gonna
replace
replace
it, how much would it cost? How much would it cost?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is it, 5 stories? How many stories? 9. How many stories is the building? 9? Okay. Okay, that's really, doesn't really matter since we're not going to do it, but what I really wanted to ask, and it's something Mr. Hardy, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Hardy, and this has been discussed here before, as far as the police station. Has any thought been given to decentralizing the police department and just maybe having one station downtown and many stations out in the neighborhoods? I just, that's been discussed. Other cities have done this. I don't know if, is that an idea that has been entertained?
Mr. Hardy?
It is an idea that has percolated up, and as part of this analysis, I'm sure that question will be asked and evaluated. So I can't say for certain what that recommendation would be, but it'll definitely be a part of the conversation.
I've always felt like, most of the crime is out in the neighborhoods. Like downtown is probably the safest place in the city, and all the police are downtown, and that's pretty good to protect us, but I'm not sure if it's the best way to police the entire city.
Very good. Short of anything else, I believe we're at West Side
Yeah, just one
Depot
more
replacement?
slide. Yeah, the final slide is the West Side Depot, and this is replace the shingles on the West Side Depot and the salt dome.
Very good. I'm going to submit, what we'll do here is finish page 8, the next 3 or 4 items, and then we'll just go ahead and knock off and hopefully start early, 2 weeks from today, to get through everything. If not, we'll need to have an additional meeting. So, Mr. Ashley, 4 items. Page 8. No, we'll just complete page 8 on the budget here. It's the miscellaneous, because we have like 3 pages or 4 pages of miscellaneous expenditures. We'll not get through that in the next 10 or 15 minutes, for sure, I'd bet. So I'm going to just say the next 3 or 4 items, we'll stop on page 8 and then go to page 9 whenever we reach it. Got it?
Page 8.
So we can knock off.
36.
I didn't get to ask this question really quick, so, Mr. Chairman, thank you so
Yes,
much.
Ms. Sims.
On the Harold K. Stubbs, the $550,000, what amount of that is for the study? And are we planning to do this contribution every year until we get a new location? So say the study is $100,000 study design, and we have $450,000 we're putting towards the debt payment for the new building. Do we plan on doing that for every year, or are we just looking at seed money for 5 years, or how are we looking at that?
So I can answer that, and Mr. Hewitt, correct me, certainly the cost of the study is going to be much lower than the $550 and change. Our hope would be that that study yields some viable options for a new Stubbs Justice Center. And so, again, much like the courts have been sacking away money, we would continue to work with APD leadership and Deputy Mayor Brown to identify each year what can be put into that fund, and then work with finance to identify what would be the best delivery method from a financial perspective. Because they will have other needs. We're very mindful that a Stubbs Justice Center replacement fund can't eat up all the IT for police for the next however many years, just like fire is very conscious of how they have been parceling out the new fire station. So to answer your question succinctly, yes, our hope would be that we would continue to sack away money, but we want to first see, is there a viable option that we can get our minds wrapped around?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ashley?
Under miscellaneous, the abandoned declining city-owned oil and gas wells. These wells are no longer produce enough income to justify their continued operation. This is an annual placeholder that we have. The next item is administration for capital, which includes salaries, benefits, supplies, and overhead for the capital planning division. Debt service is annual service on our general obligation debt for capital projects, and this includes fire station construction bonds. And then downtown beautification, that's an annual program for planting flower windows at municipal buildings, civic mall, and the city center.
Very good. So with that, we'll just go ahead and knock off, and we'll pick it up on page 8. I'm sorry, that would be on page 9, under miscellaneous, 2 weeks from today, probably at 4 o'clock, hoping. Thank you all for your patience. What? Oh, man, my leg. What's the,
our state building, like at the end of World War II or something like that. Yeah, good job. The building wasn't even damn. I mean, it's that floor. Was it one of ours? It was ours. It was like one of our bombers was off course. It was at night, of course. It wasn't like the trade towers that came tumbling down. I mean, isn't that something weird? That building was built in the midst of Russia, I think 1931. 1 year. By the time they put that on, though, they built it. It's not amazing. It isn't amazing. They could do that. I guess everybody, all the construction workers in the country were working on it because there's nothing else going on. Kept everything going pretty good.
Tara, how do I transfer this presentation to my email? I want to send this to my email. Hello? Yelling you?
Not 40.
No, I haven't talked with him. I heard that he did get some funding.
You want to send it to your personal one? Include? Now.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
I haven't heard too much from the city. I talked to Mr. DeShazier, and he was supposed to be setting up a meeting with people from the university for some kind of study. That's all I've heard. Well, I've talked with him in reference to getting some of his barbers to come to my building. And he has another building on Exchange Street. But he wanted to name it, and I want to name it something else. I wanted to have a 6-chair barbershop, and I wanted to name it Isaiah's Barbershop.
How you doing? I did have a question for you. If I can find it now.
Yes, ma'am. Someone needs to.
How you doing?
How you doing, young fella?
Good.
You all right?
You hanging out with the right crowd?
Yeah.
Hey, Willie.
Keeping his nose clean.
Yeah.
Keeping
And,
his nose.
you're keeping his nose clean? Who's keeping yours?
That would work if you really wasn't willing. Really?
Where are they? Yeah, where are they? Where's Jeff? She wants me to get him. I just really missing Jeff.
Okay.
Jeff and Don.
It's a waste of money. Yeah, we still got 30 bids. Is that what the population does?
can't put your feet out like that. You hear that saying? You can't put your feet out. I might trip, come across and have to sue. Put that lawsuit in. It's straight to the police department.
We're voting down the original one. Well, let me have to bring her. Okay, hold on. Hey, come here. Hey.
Russ, are you supporting the
Yes? Without the amendment.
I saw this thing on school board where they approved the right-of-way or something. Yeah, it was on, I don't remember the date, it was in December. Yeah. Yeah, they had to approve it, because there was something about, yeah, you waited a date for them. Yeah, it was supposed to be somebody, so that was approved at the school board center. Yeah, moving.
I've been watching that comedians looking in.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop there too, and hopefully this week I'll stop there. Yeah, what's better that way than it is? Yeah.
We're going to call the meeting for Akron City Council to order. Clerk will read the roll.
Freeman, Fusco, Hoke, Kamer, Keith, Kilby, Milkovich, Neal, Amobian, Samples, Sims, Somerville, Swirsky.
For those who voluntarily wish to do so, will you please stand as we are led in prayer by Don George, who is a volunteer at Love Akron. Immediately following our prayer, we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Sims.
Please join me in prayer. Holy God, thank you for inviting us to come into your presence, to ask for your wisdom and guidance in the affairs of this council tonight. In turn, may we also humbly invite you into this chamber, in the chamber of our hearts and minds, to direct these proceedings for the welfare of this city. Bless every area of the administration of this city. Ask a blessing upon the mayor and his staff as they carry out the executive duties. Guide and protect Mayor Horrigan and help him be a good husband and father and leader in his official duties. Give him clarity of vision, innovative ideas, and energy and health to serve this city well. Likewise, for each council person here in their wards, bless them in the same manner and give them wisdom in their homes and their primary occupations and their decision-making task as the legislative body in this city. Help them to promote what is good in your sight and place effective constraints on evil. Bring before you too, Father, our municipal court and our first responders, that you would protect them. Give them the resources that they need to perform well, strengthen their families, and provide for them. Finally, I ask for your blessing upon this city as a whole. Ask that you provide for the economic opportunity for businesses, that they may provide good jobs for our citizens. Strengthen our schools and increase their effectiveness in their education. Bless the efforts to eliminate addictions that destroy the lives and the efforts to dignify individuals and reduce crime that destroys lives. And our citizens, finally, as a whole. Strengthen them in body, mind, and soul. Bless them with the income and housing to meet their needs. Inspire them to contribute to the welfare and dignity of their communities and fellow man. Thank you, Father, for caring about every area of our lives and your willingness to intervene for us each day as you hear our prayers. I ask these things, Father, in the name of your Son and my Savior, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk will read the minutes from our previously held meeting.
Council convened in regular session at 7 p.m. with President Somerville in the chair. All members were present. Minutes of the previous regular meeting were approved. Reading of petitions and communications, passage of the consent agenda, report of standing and special committees, passage and referral of new ordinances and resolutions, representation from various departments and divisions, public speaking period, no further business on a motion by Fusco. Council adjourned at 7:40 p.m. to reconvene in regular session on January 11th, 2019, or special call.
Any corrections or additions?
Motion to approve.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Letters, petitions, and communications.
Application of Kent Shively to place land at 495 Hickory Street in an agricultural district.
I'll refer to planning.
34A petition received by Steve Papora regarding 1006 South Arlington Street. City sidewalk program petitions.
File.
Notice of new C2 liquor permit to Nali David Nasser, doing business as Mike's Mini Mart, and more at 908 Raymond.
Special attention, Councilman Somerville.
Notice of a transfer of a C1, C2, D6 liquor permit to Jacob's Drive-Thru LLC, 700 East Cauga Falls Avenue.
Special attention, Councilman Kilby.
investment earnings report for December 2018.
File.
Notice of the Ohio Division of Liquor Control regarding the hearing of Georgie's Pub doing business as Georgie's Pub at 1312 Britton Road.
Special attention, Councilman Kilby.
Resurface petition for Lake of the Woods development.
File.
Notice of a new D5 liquor permit to Kelly Avenue Property LLC, 1276 Austin Avenue.
Special attention, Councilman Samples.
Notice of transfer of a D5, D6 liquor permit to King's Sportsman Akron LLC, doing business as King's Sportsman Tavern at 1402 West Waterloo Road.
Special attention, Councilman Freeman. You have before you the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Roll call and final passage. Freeman, Fusco, Hoke, Kamer, Keith, Kilby, Milkovich, Neal, Amobian, Samples, Sims, Somerville, Swirsky.
We're moving to our old business rules. Councilman Keith.
Thank you, Madam President. We would like time, however, the sponsor of this piece that's in rules would like to be able to look at that when we come back on January the 28th.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Time will be granted. On tonight, we do have 3 public hearings. I'm going to ask if there's anyone here in the audience that is here to speak on any of the 3 listed public hearings. If you'll please stand at this time so that you can be sworn in by a member of our law department. Anyone here in the audience wishing to speak on any of the 3 public hearings tonight?
If you plan to speak during these public hearings, please stand, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, first public hearing. Notice is hereby given. A public hearing will be held by the Council of the City of Akron on Monday, January 14th, 2019, during the regular council meeting at 7 p.m. in Council Chambers, 166 South High Street, upon an ordinance authorizing the 2019 Capital Investment and Community Development Fund program.
Good evening, Madam President, committee members. The City Administration annually prepares a capital investment and community services administration budget. The budget specifies the types, locations, costs, and general descriptions of capital investment projects that are proposed for the year 2019. The budget includes the following: street and sidewalk improvements, improvements to parks, improvements to public facilities, purchase of vehicle for police department, fire department, and public services department, a purchase of a ladder truck, the completion of fire stations 2 and 4, debt service for previously financed capital projects, and ongoing water and sewer system upgrades. The objectives of the capital budget are to construct or rehabilitate facilities that are necessary for revitalization for the City of Akron, encourage private investment, thereby increasing the city's tax base and annual revenues, leveraging federal, state, and local funds wherever possible for capital projects, and to provide capital improvements to support the long-term growth consistent with the city's land use development guide plan, the Planning to Grow Akron plan, and our city Great Streets initiative. The 2019 budget is approximately $341 million. Of that, $97 million comes from local funds, $5.8 million from regional resources, $190 million from the state of Ohio, $43.6 million from the federal government, and $3.9 million of private sources. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, the Planning Department presented a portion of the budget and detailed review for City Council members that included transportation, parks, and public facilities. We will continue our presentation on Monday, January 28th. At that time, we will look at housing, community services, economic development, miscellaneous parks, and also look at our water and sewer capital needs. We ask passage for the capital budget by February 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here in the audience to speak in favor of this ordinance? Anyone here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here in the audience to speak against? Anyone here in the audience to speak against? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close our public hearing. Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to pull the committee to refer this item and take time. Mobian, Kamer, Neal, Swirsky.
This item will be referred.
Okay, our second public hearing. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the Council of the City of Akron on Monday, January 14th, 2019, during the regular council meeting at 7 p.m. in Council Chambers, 166 South High Street, upon an ordinance authorizing conditional use to establish a child daycare business center at 1536 Briding Road.
Mr. Antonucci?
Madam President, members of council, Dana McNeil is requesting permission to establish a child daycare business center at this location. Proposed daycare center would occupy the basement area of the 1,260 square foot house. Care for a maximum of 12 children at a time would be provided by the petitioner and 2 part-time assistants. Child care services would be available Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to midnight. Weekend hours are from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. No changes are proposed for the interior or the exterior of the house. The entire backyard play area would be enclosed by a chain link fence. Petitioner has operated Fun World Daycare for 11 years and has been at this location for 6 months. Since the children are dropped off and picked up at varying times of the day, traffic congestion should not be an issue. Providing care for up to an additional 6 children would not significantly raise the level of activity on this property or have a detrimental impact on nearby homes. Both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thank you. Is there anyone here in the audience to speak in favor of this ordinance? Anyone here in the audience to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak against? Anyone here to speak against? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilman Fusco.
I'd like to pull the committee for a favorable report with suspension of the rules. Mobian, Kamer, Neal, Swirsky.
Any objections? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Yes, thank you. The report of the committee is favorable. The Planning Commission, the Planning Department all recommended approval. This coincides with the state's licensing procedure for 12 children that can be babysat at any given time. And also what we're now instituting also is that the requirement that this runs with the petitioner, not the land. So we recommend approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Roll call and final passage. Freeman, Fusco, Hoke, Kamer, Keith, Kilby, Milkovich, Neal, Amobian, Samples, Sims, Somerville, Swirsky. Third public hearing. Notice hereby given a public hearing will be held by the Council of the City of Akron on January 14th, 2019, during the regular council meeting at 7 p.m. in Council Chambers, 166 South High Street, upon an ordinance authorizing the conditional use to construct a medical marijuana processing facility at 844 East Talmadge Avenue.
Madam President, members of council, Ohio Medical Solutions proposes to renovate this 11,293 square foot, 1-story brick and masonry block building to process medical marijuana. The medical manufacturing that will be done will include taking raw materials purchased from licensed cultivators and then grinding, extracting, filtering, formulating, processing, and packaging extracted cannabis oils. All shipping and receiving will be conducted indoors. The entire perimeter of the property will be enclosed with an 8 feet high chain link fence topped with barbed wire and under constant video surveillance. All products will be stored in a highly secured vault. Petitioners state that would create approximately 20 to 30 jobs that will generate an estimated annual payroll of $1 million a year. The proposed repurposing of this building into a medical marijuana processing facility will be a harmonious use in this industrial area, and both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thank you. Is there anyone here in the audience to speak in favor of this ordinance? We're just going to ask if you could please give us your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Josh O'Neill. Address is 207 South 9th Street, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I just wanted to give a quick overview of the organization and the plans for this facility. So we're pursuing the conditional use permit to build a processing facility. So we will be purchasing raw material from licensed cultivators in the state of Ohio and processing it into finished goods which are then sold at dispensaries, which is the point that consumers or patients can purchase the medicine. So it's our business is all B2B. It's a wholesaling type business model, and it's going to be, the medicine will be produced in a pharmaceutical grade environment. So it's a substantial renovation of the existing facility, which was an auto shop, and more recently a dried good distribution facility. We're led by a physician, Dr. Kyle Kingsley, and I've been involved with the business since the very beginning, and we look forward to be part of the community.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in the audience to speak in favor? Is there anyone here in the audience to speak against? Anyone here to speak against? Mr. Smith, were you sworn in? And it looks like our law department has stepped out for a minute. One moment, okay?
Please raise your right hand. Answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
The only reason I objected is...
Mr. Smith, can you please give us your name and your address?
Okay. Well, you call my last name. My first name is Willie. I stay at 225 Chittenden. The only reason that I have some objections to this is City Council and administration has not set a quota on this for the hiring for the people of the city of Akron, which, basically, it's our land. We've been taking care of it for a long time. And if we're just going to give up land and space like this while somebody else make a profit, I don't see how it benefits the taxpayers and the citizens of the city of Akron. So like I say, I disclaim this because we have not set a quota on how many people out of the city of Akron should be hired in these dispensaries that's coming up, or these cultivators, or any parts of the marijuana industry. And it's going to turn out to be millions of dollar industry, and I think we citizens of Akron should profit from it.
Thank you. Anyone else here in the audience to speak against? Seeing and hearing none, we will close our public hearing. Councilman Fusco.
I'd like to pull the committee for a favorable report with suspension of the rules. Amobian? Kamer? Neal? Swirsky?
Any objections? Did you have a question, Councilwoman Sims?
So earlier today, there was some discussions about the percentage of sourcing we'd be doing locally for the facility. Is that being considered for whether we're writing that in as a conditional or use or not?
We can on a zoning issue. I don't believe we can do that on a zoning issue. This is a land use issue, not a. Yeah.
So I don't.
So I don't
well,
believe
maybe
we can do that. I'd like to ask the law department that question.
I think it's clear that we can't do that, but
don't think it is.
To the point, I think that the discussion we had earlier today about sourcing locally and what that looks like, I think is an important question. I hope that we
agree.
do
It
have.
certainly is, but I don't believe
so perhaps,
for us
perhaps
it's a zoning issue.
Yeah, perhaps it's not a zoning issue, but nonetheless an issue. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Kilby?
I just want to say this is in my ward, and I think the gentleman said they're going to hire 30 people. Some of these are really technical jobs that you have to have a lot of education for, but I did talk to him after the meeting. There will be some security guards and unskilled, and I told him that we're mostly concerned about the economic development in the way of jobs for our people, not necessarily the suburbs, but Akron. So, I don't think we can put it in a zoning ordinance, but I think he understands that, and I think he's probably going to try to do something along those lines.
Thank you. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Roll call and final passage. Freeman, Fusco, Hoke, Kamer, Key, Kilby, Milkovich, Neal, Amobian, Samples, Sims, Somerville, Swirsky.
Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. The report of the committee is favorable on item number 4. We request suspension of the rules.
The committee's report is favorable. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Roll call and final passage. Freeman, Fusco, Hoke, Kamer, Key, Kilby, Milkovich, Neal, Amobian, Samples, Sims, Somerville, Swirsky.
Councilman Fusco?
For the committee's file items number 5 and 6.
Items number 5 and 6 will be filed.
For item number 7, we have a substitute that the clerk could please read in.
Substitute offered as an amendment, offered by Councilman Fusco, ordinance authorizing conditional use to establish a child daycare business center at 716 City View Avenue and declare an emergency.
Councilman Fusco?
Yes, the report of the committee is favorable, and we ask for suspension of the rules.
Any objections? Seeing and hearing none, the rules have been suspended.
Yes, thank you, President Somerville. This is, again, a daycare center. However, though, we had added the rule that whenever the petitioner would leave that particular location, then the conditional use would be lifted.
Thank you. The rules have been suspended. The committee's report is favorable. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Roll call and final passage. Freeman, Fusco, Hoke, Kamer, Keith, Kilby, Milkovich, Neal, Amobian, Samples, Sims, Somerville, Swirsky.
Councilman Fusco?
For the committee on item number 8 is adverse.
Okay, the committee's report is an adverse report. All in favor of an adverse report signify by saying aye. Aye. Nay. Roll call.
No, okay. Roll call. Freeman. Aye. Yes? Yes. Fusco.
Aye.
Hoke. Aye. Kamer. Aye. Keith. Aye. Kilby. Aye. Milkovich. Aye. Neal. Aye. Amobian. Samples. Sims. Somerville.
No.
Swirsky.
Aye.
The adverse report is 10 to 2 and 1 abstention.
No, it's actually 1 no and 2 abstentions.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. The report of the committee is to file item number 9.
Item number 9 will be filed.
And I believe it's time on the balance of the agenda.
Time will be granted. Public Utilities, Councilman Samples.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Time, please.
Time will be granted. We'll now move into our new legislation. Rules.
Item 0, offered by Councilpersons Sims and Fusco. It's a substitute offered as an amendment. It's a resolution expressing disapproval of the partial government shutdown and declaring an emergency.
Councilwoman Keith?
Thank you, Madam President. Is that, could you read in the amendment to that, Mr. Clerk?
Yes. It says here in section 1 in the bottom of the page, the Council for the City of Akron disapproves of the federal government shutdown and urges President Donald Trump, congressional leaders, and members of Congress to end the shutdown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. I would like to, Madam President, I would like to poll the members of the Rules Committee for suspension of the rules with a favorable report. Okay, thank you. Amobian? Freeman? Fusco? Hoke? Okay. The committee's report is favorable, and we are now asking the council as a whole for suspension of rules with this favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any objections on suspension of the rules? Okay, seeing none, the rules have been suspended. Councilwoman Sims, do you have any further comment?
So I just want to say I appreciate that the whole entire council would feel necessary to join the resolution. I mean, the realities are that we have a government that is holding everyday people hostage. My hope is, even after this, that we would be urging Congress to restore those folks whole who have been left without pay, who are on furloughs as well. But I think the thing that we talked about this afternoon that was really, really important, I certainly appreciate Councilman Hoke's amendment to talk about everybody needs to join the party in finding resolution and stop the harm that's happening across the country. But my bigger issue is that who's at risk relative to our most vulnerable population. We currently in Ohio, I believe, have 1.6 million folks who receive SNAP benefits. It's my understanding that we have enough resources that have been earmarked to see them through February. So if we don't kind of wrestle with this thing and put it to bed, we just subject so many people, especially our most vulnerable populations, to not even having food on their table. So again, I appreciate the council as a whole joining this resolution and urging that we bring the shutdown to an end. Thank you, Madam President.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To appreciate those who brought in this resolution and the amendment. Just to share on some of the discussion, I happened to be at the Akron Canton Real Estate Investment Association meeting this past Wednesday. It's a professional organization. It's the local body of the state and national body of professional real estate investors. And the discussion at that table was what happens when, for people who get Section 8 housing, subsidized housing, and what will happen for landlords when that rent check doesn't come in. Will there be a push for evictions if this takes much longer? And there was discussion about how, what the moral obligation was, but what the financial responsibility is for those people that have those properties. I'm not sure how that discussion ended. I didn't stay to the end, but I do want to say this. Brought it up during the committee meeting. As a city, we do have a utility that folks use. And we can easily, clearly identify if someone is a federal worker. If you listen to the news, you see in some communities where restaurants or different businesses are extending financial support and help, putting their money where their mouth is. I would just ask, and I know we're on the verge of the Akron Cares program that usually opens up on Dr. King's weekend and is expired by that Tuesday. It doesn't last 24 hours. But I think we can easily put out a call to anyone that's a federal worker that has a water bill where we can extend to them a courtesy extension, not waiving the bill, but a courtesy extension until this thing comes to a head. So I just ask that those who have the power to do so can look into it, and then we can support that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, may I make a motion for council as a whole?
Yes, you may. There's a motion for council as a whole. Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
We haven't voted on it yet.
Roll call and final passage. Freeman. Fusco. Hoke. Kamer, Keith, Kilby, Milkovich, Neal, Amobian, Sample, Sims, Somerville, Swirsky. Okay, item number 1 was already dealt with. Item number 2, offered by Mr. Fusco, ordinance approving the sale of vacant city-owned properties pursuant to the city's A Lot for a Little program, determining said property is not needed for public use and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Fusco.
Consent agenda.
This item will be placed on the consent agenda.
Item number 3 is offered by Swirsky. It's a resolution expressing, support for the application of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources to designate the Cuyahoga River as a state-designated water trail and declaring an emergency.
Councilman Swirsky.
I didn't know you were going to be bringing it up. But, yeah, this is an important step forward. The city working with a wide variety of partners in collaboration to make sure that our waterways are clean and that people have access to them and that it's used not only for recreation but to attract industry, for economic development, and for the public's interest. So the city will soon be applying for a designation to get that status conferred upon us. Part of that process is submitting an application, which, as I understand, is going to come forward in a few weeks.
Correct. You can refer it, Mr. Swirsky.
So the committee will refer this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this item will be referred. We will now go to the portion of our meeting that we refer to as our public comment period. If you wish to speak to this council during this time, we're going to ask that you please sign in, state your full name, spell your last name, and give us your address. You will have 3 minutes to speak to this body. Speakers are reminded that this is an official meeting. Remarks should be kept respectful and germane to council business. Speakers who refrain from making any personal attacks, anyone who breaches decorum, will be ruled out of order and may be removed from council chambers.
Name is Willie Smith, last name is spelled S-M-I-T-H. This is some food for thought. I'm taking some of this from what I heard the mayor say. He wanted to make some changes in the city charter. I think like this, and many other people think, taxpayers are overpaying for representation. Akron population has been reduced from 300,000 population to less than 200,000. Mathematically, that's a third reduction. We, the people, for sure think representation need be cut by a third also. Parks and recreation need to be reinvented. Programming at recreation centers are not creative and attractive enough for 70% of the 30% of people that attend our recreation centers for leisure or recreation purposes. And that 70% hasn't happened to be Caucasian. How could it be in this city where we have, 70% Caucasian population and they don't attend the park? So it must be something wrong. It's got to be the welcoming mat at the recreation parks or the programming.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Good evening, Council President. My name is Eddie Ammons with ETA Development. Speaking on more of the dismal with the minority contractors. As what I brought to you last week, we built a building inside of a building, dealing with safety aspects. In 41 years of doing this type of work, I've only had a couple hematomas, head bumps. Another gentleman had a broken knuckle, these workers. On this work site, my staff and I were constantly harassed and under duress as a result of Mr. Tim DeMarco's insert and harping over very minor safety issues, mostly safety glasses on me because I wasn't actually working. He just constantly on me and I'm way over here. And it's not a requirement for someone that's not working. With enormous emails and just constant harassment. And all we had, injuries we had on that job, I had 2 guys that had little splinters in the hand, and we was on this job for 10 months. On 3 separate occasions, Donnelly had substitute superintendents on the job, on this site. First it was Ed Ellsbury twice, then Mr. Jason Harper. Both men individually expressed how we were receiving different treatment. These were Donnelly's own superintendents that came in sub when Mr. DeMarco was away, thank goodness. There was constant differentials between what was appropriate for my workers and what was work for the other employees for the other contracts, i.e. their employees would be riding around on carts with their feet hanging off. I think one time we moved the truck with a man just standing there and they made a mountain out of it. I mean, they were riding around on carts, it was just, I don't understand it. While I have utmost respect for Mr. John Smith, Harry Miller, he had a backhoe operator that, I got pictures to show. This man was just banging into the corn fast. We built this building. Once we got away from under the tent, he just kept hitting the building, breaking off the concrete, I don't know where this guy come from. Then another occasion, I'm standing there, we're on a steep hill. I got pictures showing all this. They had a real old loader. This thing, the brakes go out. It go down the hill, about hit my truck, hit workers down the bottom of the hill. I asked Mr. DeMarco, all he says, what about it? When my backhoe there, I got to have a flagman by it because I might have a little intermittent with my reverse alarm. But some of the machines they had, the alarms didn't work at all. And I come from very humble roots. I'm a foster child, and I had a father that raised me, and I come from humble beginnings, and both we understand the wrongs that were done to me and my wife, and I just feel that something should be done. I just saw it, and I got 3 sets of pictures for you to see, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammonds.
Madam President and members of the council, I'm John Beatty, B-E-A-T-Y, 2047 Wyndham Road. I was going to read more from Sage Lewis's book, but I was not able to find the house where the book is. So I'm going to do something else. I want to invite all of you, thank all of you for your resolution to end the shutdown. I invite you to put feet with your resolution this Saturday to come down to the Federal Building at 11 a.m. to join the Women's March. We're going to march to the Sojourner Truth building and hear again Sojourner Truth's speech, and then finally wind up at the Art Spaces Museum, close next door to the Art Museum. I want to share with you a book that I read with alarm some time ago. It's called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. And I want to read to you from Dr. Leonard Glass's portion of this book. Why I choose to speak out. These are frightening times. The current occupant of the White House is widely perceived as erratic and vindictive. Yet those very elements of his character may well have endeared him to his base. He speaks without hesitation or reflection and repudiates political correctness. That convinces some that he is authentic, saying things that they felt but have feared to say out loud. He appears to be easily moved to anger and heedless retaliation. I think he's upset about the recent election. That too could be appealing to people who feel powerless and oppressed by an economic system and the societal changes that haven't preserved their status or allowed them to fulfill their dreams and potential. I can identify with those feelings. Ironically, even better now, because I'm experiencing a variation on the powerlessness I've just described. It would be comforting to believe I had a forceful advocate who possessed the authority and motivation to fix what worries me. Alas, the shoe is on the other foot. Although I have profound doubts about how sincerely motivated Mr. Trump is to pursue the interests of the truly powerless. Yet I can feel a sense of community with those who share my apprehension by raising an alarm and a hope that others will be comforted by seeing that their concerns are shared. Still others may feel empowered with a heightened, psychiatrically informed understanding of the nature of the danger and may be better equipped to respond effectively by virtue of what I and others write. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Beatty.
Good evening, Council. My name is Harrington Hargrove, Hargrove. I'm here in reference to, on October the 29th, the city had the Beacon Journal wrote an article in reference to minority business lack of opportunity. And it was sponsored by the Guard Foundation. So my question to this body is, would you please do something to advance the opportunity of the African American community? And first of all, I would like to say we need the mayor's office for leadership. We need the planning department for inclusion. And then we need the economic development department in order to find a way to bring the funding that we need. I was talking to Mr. Somerville, and I told him, I have an economic development plan that would uplift our community in a 5-year period. I've asked that the city put up $250,000 a year, contact the state, ask them to put up $250,000 a year for 5 years. That would be $2,500,000. Huntington Bank, when they took over First Merit, they said that they would be involved in business loans to this city. Bring Huntington Bank into the table and sit down and talk with them. And this money that I'm talking about, if the city be involved and we bring the state, this money could be guaranteed to the banks. So if they put up money, whatever money they put up, the state could guarantee it. And so this is what I'm asking of this body. Like I say, we don't need another survey, another study, because we already have one, and it's been found that our community has been denied. So this is what I'm asking of this body, to just a little funding, and it'll go a long way, and it'll elevate the entire city and include the African American community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hargrove.
Good evening. Jackie Easley, 870 Mercer Avenue. First, I want to start off by saying thank you, Council and the Street Department, for expediently coming in and cleaning the curb last week. Okay. And I kind of got mixed feelings now, because I was going to acknowledge the Recreation Department for working hard to come up with activities for our city. I read today on the internet that they're bringing the water parks to our city, so I kind of got a little excited over that. So I'm gonna be looking forward to that. And my next comment is, I support the body in regard to them supporting the citizens here to help them get their water bills paid. I got a $200 water bill right here, so it's a struggle out here to pay your water bills. I'm single. I get a $100 water bill every month. Why am I paying so much in water, you know? It's just me. So, so I would like to request that the city gives the citizens further opportunity to voice their concerns about the water bills. I was sitting here last Monday night, and there was a guy got up and he kind of, spoke out on the water bill. So I didn't realize that it was an open forum for the citizens to voice their concerns over the water bill until I went home and I decided to watch the 11 o'clock news, and Channel 5 came on and said that the floor was open for the citizens to voice their opinions about the water bill, but who knew? Because I'm sure if the citizens of Akron had known that the floor was open to voice your opinions about the water bill, this whole room would have been full when you're getting $200 water bills. So I just wanted to voice that tonight. And so my concern is there a lack of communication between the body and citizens? Is there a lack of communication between the body? So where was that posted at, that it was open for the citizens to speak out on the water bills?
Mrs. Dixon, I am not aware of that at all, but hopefully after the meeting, we can see if someone has heard that and we can kind of get to the bottom of it for you.
Yeah, it was on 11 o'clock news last week, how there was only one person in this whole city for the citizens to speak out for the water bill. It's been going on and on for a long time, and it's been a hardship on the citizens here to keep these water bills paid. So I just got to come and make a little bit of noise about the water bill for the citizens of Akron, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Easley. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak at our public comment period? Seeing and hearing none, we will close our public comment period and move into our committee assignments. Rules, Councilman Keith.
2:30.
Budget and Finance, Councilman Freeman. Planning, Councilman Fusco. Public Service, Councilman Keith.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2 o'clock.
Public Utilities, Councilman Samples. Public Safety, Councilman Kamer. Parks and Rec, Councilman Neal. Housing, Councilman Kilby. Health and Social Services, Councilman Amobian. Economic Development, Councilman Sims. Green Committee, Councilman Swirsky.
1 o'clock.
Is there anything else coming before council? Councilman Hoke?
Thank you, Madam President. Everybody, just wanted to remind you, and there hasn't been a press release yet, but it should be forthcoming. This Friday, the 18th, is the Great Akron Chili Cook-Off. And it starts at 11 or 11:30 to 1 o'clock. There's 6 entrants that are going to be cooking chili, different varieties, and I'm sure they're going to all be good because they're all trying to win the contest. Cost is $12, and you get the six varieties of chili to test and taste, and then vote. And I think there's also a beverage that's included in that. The beverage is either a soda or a water. At Lock 3, yes, at Lock 3. So put that on your calendars and be sure to come down. And all the proceeds go to Akron Children's Hospital, as they have in the past, and it's for a great cause. And a lot of people will be down there, and I'm sure you'll have a good time. So see you downtown on Friday.
Thank you, Councilman Hoke. Councilman Sims?
Thank you, Madam President. I too just want to remind or let folks know, I hope you can join us for the Women's March. They're happening across the country this Saturday. We will assemble at the Federal Building, again, go over to the Sojourner Truth marker, but we'll spend most of the afternoon at the Summit Art Space hearing and doing some great work. I just also wanted to say, we've heard a lot from our constituents relative to economic opportunities, particularly for the African American community. I would just hope that we would really look at the decisions we make through that lens and be willing to really look at what that looks like. I think tonight we missed a real opportunity. I think part of our work as legislators is to figure out how we balance interests, what's good for our communities and also what's good for the folks who invest in our communities. And I just feel like we really missed that boat tonight. So I would ask us again, I know we're in a political season where everything is subject, but I asked us not to hold our people hostage or to hold opportunities hostage that people are deserving of having. I'm sorry that we missed that window. I hope that the opportunity revisits itself, particularly for those businesses who have committed not only time and decades of investment in a neighborhood and not to be able to expand and offer opportunities for other folks to work and to upgrade their businesses. So again, I just pray that we are looking at how we negotiate, how we balance interests of all parties and not veer into political wrangling that only really harms the people that we say that we're here to serve. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Sims. Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Councilwoman Sims' point, the year is going to accelerate, especially with them moving up the election period. But the work that we have to do around this horseshoe needs to continue. And I know we've always struggled in the past selecting a time for this council to caucus and set an agenda and a strategic plan. I think in light of what's been put before this body with the economic conditions, we need to put practices in place that address that. In light with this being a negotiation year for contracts, and we still have, that's been brought before us, I'm kind of wondering where he is, Mr. Noel. We haven't addressed that issue. And as has been discussed, I believe, I appreciate the plan that was, the strategic plan that was brought to us by the administration and the Park and Rec Department about, so we can know what we need to shoot for and what we need to support financially in regards to the Park and Rec Department. Because it's going to be difficult, I'd ask that by the end of this month, we can shoot for the month of February, possibly taking 2 Mondays where this council comes for 2 hours in between our regular time to put together a plan, some things that we agree on. You know, we need to understand, we've been talking about equity and inclusion around here. There's a racial equity tool that has been discussed. Usually, this time we bring in a resolution acknowledging this nation's day of racial healing, which takes place, if not the second Tuesday of the month, the third Tuesday, I think it's the third, right after the King holiday. And when we've discussed that in the past, we talked about how it's just not a resolution just to be a resolution, but it's something that we need to work towards. I believe everyone received the racial equity toolkit that was sent out that shows us how to, and it says racial equity, but just an equity toolkit. Several things come to mind when we talk about equity that has been brought to us as a body. One is the tow truck legislation piece, where we had the folks that came down and said they want to have an opportunity to participate in that process. The other one is, you know, the piece dealing with the health care, and of course those who have come down and shared with us about economic opportunity from the minority business perspective. We can't just have people come down here and speak to us and not really put together a plan. So, Madam Chair, I'm asking that the leadership of council, yourself, Mr. Fusco, and Mr. Milkovich, get together and identify 2 Mondays where this body could come and put together a plan on how to address those issues, how to support what we've seen come before us today, and I'm sure there's other issues, but we need to have a plan, or if not, everything's going to get lost in the political process. But we still got business to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Neal. Councilwoman Samples?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to remind us all, not that we don't know, that in celebration of the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, there are several events going on around the city of Akron. One in particular will be at Lebanon Baptist Church on Sunday at 5 o'clock. And, you know, I don't know if many of us attend those different celebrations across the city, but I think now we are in a time where I think we should all be attending, because we, in this country, it seems like we are very sensitive to racial issues lately. You can't even say anything to people anymore. Everyone's so sensitive. And I think this is a good time for us to reflect on the importance of coming together. So if you have events in your ward, I would encourage you to share them with your residents, and I think this could probably help with a little bit of unity and healing around this city as it relates to that. And to what Mr. Beatty said about the Women's March, it's going to be a really exciting day. Last year I spoke in Cleveland. This is my first year in Akron, and I'm delighted that I will be participating in the I Am a Woman speech with my sisterhood on Saturday. So we are looking forward to that, and it's from 11 to 8 p.m. At the Summit Arts Page after the march. So it's really a fun time, and I think we all should try to take part in that if we can, if we have time. And happy belated birthday, Mr. Beatty. I want to be like you one day when I grow up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Samples. Before we adjourn, just want to let everyone know that we will not be in session on next Monday, as we will be celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Day. To Mrs. Samples' point, I hope that on Monday at some point you can participate in some of the planned activities that are happening throughout the service as we remember the life and the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. We have a motion for adjournment. Oh, Councilman Kilby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to kind of reiterate what my colleague here on my left said. You know, it seems like sometimes all these people come down and, you know, we listen, but we don't hear. And Mr. Noem, I guess he got tired of coming down. I think he was coming down for about a year. His issue was never addressed. We just kind of ignored him. And I just think we can do a better job and you know, do something about these problems rather than just listen and not hear. And I want to thank the clerk for getting the clock fixed. Not like that red minute hand we got up there. And everybody have a good holiday and do something besides just have a day off on Martin Luther King Day, because he was a great American.
There's a motion for adjournment. Any objections? Seeing none, we're adjourned.
This concludes the live broadcast of Akron City Council. Margot Somerville, President of Council, presiding. Dilly, dilly.